The worst helicopter parenting fails that will leave you speechless. My first roommate in college had a helicopter mum whose helicoptering frankly bordered on terrifying. You see, he was born deaf. She never allowed him to learn sign language because she'd always be there to protect him, and he needs to live a normal life, not a deaf life. Her words, not mine. He was pretty good at lip reading and could vocalize remarkably well given how profound his hearing loss was. She pulled me aside and very seriously asked me to inform her any time he talked to a girl. She said he has problems with girls trying to take advantage of him. She insisted he say good night to her every night, which meant he had to be on instant messenger, and deaf so he couldn't call without using a specialized typing phone. He needed to call her for at least an hour every night or else she'd call our room phone in a panic looking for him. I teach high school and occasionally college. One IEP meeting for a high school student, the mother mentioned her other kid was enrolled at a local university and that she, the mother, was also enrolling in the same classes to ensure her daughter did her work. Facepalm. And kind of unrelated, but I find it funny, by pure chance my mum and my brother were enrolled in the same class this term at university, and my mum was super adamant that my brother not embarrass her during the class. I worked as an instructor at a karate school, and there was one parent no one wanted to deal with. Her son was in our 10 to 13-year-old class. The school had a little waiting area where parents could watch their kids, mainly used for the 4 through 6-year-old class, and she'd sit in the waiting area staring at her son. One class we were doing very light contact drills, no more than a poke, and she came out onto the floor and started yelling at me for putting her son in danger. I asked her to please leave the floor. I changed the drill to no contact, and she ran onto the floor yelling at me for singling her kid out. I stopped the class and told her to speak with the head instructor. She left to talk to him, and I looked over at the kid, and he was crying. I quickly moved to a fun drill, and he started to smile. When the class ended, a few other parents came up to me and said, "That mum is nuts," and she kept trying to come to the kids' classes. In short, mum signed her kid up for karate and didn't want him to be in a contact sport. I was at college orientation and one parent came up to my friend and said, "That girl over there is my daughter. You go up to her and introduce yourself to her and be her friend." It wasn't done in a cute way, it was semi-threatening. College. So effectively saying this to other adults. I mean, you only get a taste of the sheer crazy that the poor girl had to go through every day of her life up to that point. I just hope that some of these kids get better at limiting contact and setting boundaries as they stay away from home more. When my niece was 14 or so, her mother, my sister-in-law, was so far up her butt that I'm not sure the kid actually ever spoke for herself. One day, my niece was in the bathroom and she took a little too long to finish, so her mother stood outside the door and said, "What's taking you so long? Are you wrapping the toilet paper around your hand like I showed you? Do you need me to come in there and show you again? Why is this door locked? Open this door." It was Thanksgiving dinner and the whole family just stared at my sister-in-law in shock. We could all hear my niece crying in the bathroom. That woman is a frickin' psychopath. Some guy I know wanted to move out from his control-freak mum at age 23 or so. She kept complaining about the places he was looking at to rent. Eventually, she decides it's just better if she buys an apartment and lets him rent it from her just to make sure everything's in order. However, she couldn't quite afford it, so she involves the ex-husband, even if the dude said explicitly that he wanted nothing to do with her plan. I don't know all the details, but that's how he ended up anyway. She has a key to his place, and yes, she uses it to check on the place every time he's out of the apartment, and she even leaves small presents for him just to let him know that she was in there. I played a lot of hockey as a kid. I had a plate of nachos and drink thrown at me by a mother, and was challenged to a fight by the father of one of the kids on the other team. The reason being I scored twice that game, and he was the goalie, and apparently there were scouts there. There weren't, we weren't that good. Keep in mind that I was about 400 kilometers from home and staying with my team at a hotel, and this was in the arena lobby after the game while watching the next game. Man, hockey parents are the worst. There was this guy on my team whose dad would routinely get kicked out of rinks, which forced a penalty on our team. There's no kid in any sport who thinks, "Yeah, Dad, you get him," when their father is acting like a petulant 4-year-old in the stands. An old neighbor of mine was notorious for being clingy to her daughter. Really, one of those mums who tries to live vicariously through her kid. Daughter is now a junior in high school. Mum bought them identical phones, cases, and set identical backgrounds so that nobody would know when one had the other's phone. Mum would take daughter's phone and text daughter's boyfriend pretending to be her. "I love you," "I want to be together forever," etc. Even some of the daughter's friends have caught mum texting them pretending to be the daughter. I feel like that's more like a vampire parent than helicopter. Parents going on job interviews with their kid. Happens all the time. Same with medical school interviews. I had a girl come in for a job interview with her mum. Neither introduced themselves properly, and the mum wouldn't shut up about how perfect her daughter was. I had my supervisor do the full interview with the girl while I talked to the mother. I told the mum straight, "You are ruining your daughter's chances at getting hired at any job." She got offended, and I clarified, "If your daughter can't show up to work without her parent making her, it doesn't make her look like a reliable employee." She was offended anyway, and damn right we didn't hire that girl. I went to primary school with a kid whose parents were Italian immigrants. His mum would come to the school gate every lunch and give him pasta and make him sit there and eat it all in front of her. Authentic Italian food every day for lunch? Sounds good to me. I knew a kid who wouldn't be allowed to take his Lego sets apart even years later. I don't think his mum understood the point of Legos. I knew a kid who only got to assemble his Lego sets once and under tight supervision from his mom. Every piece had to be the same as in the instructions. In the end, they superglued them together. Frickin' brutal. I really hope they eventually watched the Lego movie together. A friend of mine turns 19 in a month. He can't hang out past 7 o'clock, his parents won't let him get a phone, even though they aren't in any financial troubles that we know of, and worst of all, they won't let him get a job until he turns 21. He's afraid to talk to people from how much they shelter him. It's actually pretty sad. Forgot to mention his parents won't let him go get his license either. He has his temps, but they refuse to take him driving anywhere. He took the test once and failed because he got 30+ points off because they won't teach him how to drive. My mum was a grade 1 teacher. One year she had this trouble kid who wouldn't be quiet during lessons, was rude to other kids and teachers, all around a little bag of crap. But his mother, well, his mother was far worse. She wouldn't believe anyone but her son about anything, and this kid knew how to play his mum like a fiddle. While he was a hellspawn at school, he acted all shy and victimized when his mum was around. They had meetings pretty much every other week. My mum, his mum, and eventually the principal got involved as well. But no matter what they told his mum, "No, my son is perfect, he's an angel, he'd never do any of that." What? He hit another kid in the face and made him bleed and there were 30 witnesses, including 3 teachers and 2 parent volunteers? He'd never do something like that, you all must have seen it wrong. This kid caused so much stress to my mum that year. First off, no, the kid's name isn't Eric Cartman. Even Cartman would be better than that because at least he's entertaining. Second, to answer some questions about providing proof, the mother wouldn't hear any of it. She was convinced not only that her son was an angel, but also that the school was plotting against them. I did talk to my dad. My mum had passed away in 2005 from unrelated circumstances, and he said eventually his mother did get the wool pulled off from over her eyes. But it took practically 2 years to do it. I'd forgotten that my mum taught kindergarten the previous year, and guess who was in that class? No, their method wasn't recording him on videotape, because something about other kids being recorded in classrooms required permits and paperwork. Catholic school morality and anti-money spending crap, I don't know. But what they did do was arrange for the mother to witness his behavior in person without him being aware that she was even there. She witnessed him tackling a kid to the ground unprovoked and throwing a clump of dirt and grass at a teacher that separated them. My dad says my mum's favorite moment was seeing how wide the mother's eyes went when she saw it, followed by how much more wide her son's eyes got when he saw his mum walking out to him. Well, although it does sound like it took way too long for her to come around, I think that some of the others we've heard about today wouldn't even believe it if they saw it. Some awful people can watch those they care about commit literally everything wrong in front of them and still find a way to blame it on someone else. My roommate in college would not do his laundry ever until his mum came to do it for him every couple of months. He had tons of clothes and would basically just start piling them up in the closet as he wore them. Then his mum would come in and basically monopolize the dorm laundry facilities for 3 hours, doing all of his laundry. I didn't know her, just said hi a couple of times in passing. One time I came back and all of my laundry was done too and put away. And she folded my underwear? Folded? I was kinda creeped out, but then, hey, clean laundry. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? When I was 14, my dad took me to France on vacation. We didn't have a ton of money, but he had gotten a really great deal on the airfare, so we decided to just go with the 2 of us. This is until my dad started dating this lady a few weeks before we left, so he ended up inviting her. She in turn brought her 14-year-old daughter, who was very cute. Score, right? Not at all. First off, it was a long flight and we were missing 2 weeks of school, so the both of us, myself and I believe her name was Sarah, we had a ton of schoolwork. So we of course had both independently planned to get it all done on the flights so we wouldn't have to do anything during the trip. Well, to be clear, I planned to do my work. Apparently, Sarah had planned to have her mum do hers. I crap you not, her mother spent the entire 10-hour flight doing her daughter's homework for her. And I don't mean helping, I mean actually sitting there doing the work while Sarah listened to her headphones and screwed around. I believe it was at this point that my dad realized he'd made a series of serious compounding errors here. First, getting involved with this woman. Second, inviting her along on our one and only international vacation ever. And third, allowing her to bring her irredeemable super witch of a daughter along. Sarah refused to carry her own luggage. And she had a lot of it too. We ended up sharing the load between the three of us while she had only her carry-on. Any attempt to be nice to her generally resulted in a "shut the F up" from Sarah. Her mum heard every one of her cuss words and said nothing. If we stopped to see a sight, Sarah wasn't interested and she'd just wander off and then we'd have to go hunting for her. The most her mum would say was, "Sarah honey, please stay with us," to which Sarah would respond with some vulgarity that her mother would again ignore. Basically, there was nothing she wouldn't complain about, not a thank you to be had ever, and I've never heard the F word from a 14-year-old as often before or since. On our fourth day, we decided to eat dinner on a floating restaurant on the Seine. As with most establishments in Paris, this one had a small dog that ran around. Sarah, in her infinite wisdom, decided to feed the dog from the table. She was feeding it basically everything she could. Bread, cooked fish and cream sauce, you name it. At one point I said, "Sarah, you shouldn't feed the dog that stuff, it's not good for—" "Mind your own effing business." My dad looked at me and I knew he was trying to telepathically apologize for the situation. At this moment, however, karma took over. We began hearing this hacking noise from under the table, followed by the clear and unmistakable sound of a small dog throwing up. It did so all over Sarah's feet. She started screaming and crying, of course. She was wearing sandals, and the throw-up was inside her shoes. We couldn't help ourselves. My dad and I started laughing so hard we could barely breathe. We sat there laughing ourselves nearly into a coma while the mother frantically tried to calm the daughter, and the restaurant staff kind of stood there in shock. The mum, of course, couldn't believe we were laughing and was indignant towards our behavior. She yelled at my dad, who responded with something like, "That was the best thing to happen this whole trip," and then continued laughing. My dad put them on a plane the next morning and sent them home. We spent the next 10 days, just the two of us, traveling down the Loire Valley over to Belgium and Germany. We had a wonderful time and it's one of the best memories of growing up with my dad. I've been in and worked at a university for the past 10 years or so. To me, the worst examples aren't the incredibly hyper-controlling parents around lower, middle, or high school age. Those parents can be absolutely ridiculous, don't get me wrong, but when the kid is still living under their roof, I can understand being involved. For me, the absurd ones are the ones that continue helicoptering once the kid gets to college. A few things I've seen in my years here: parents calling professors to complain about their kid's grades or how their kid was graded. I've seen this all the way up to graduate students. Parents demanding our registrar change their kid's schedule at their request because they're paying tuition. A parent demanding our registrar change their kid's major at their request because, again, they're the ones paying tuition. This mother demanded that her son be a biomedical engineering major instead of a computer science major. And parents sitting in their kids' classes on the first day with their kids and going up to talk to the professor afterwards. I mean, I can understand sitting in the back of one of your kids' first really big classes just to get a feeling for what they're going to be doing, but sitting with them and actually participating? Oh my god. Fortunately, the law and our school are adamant about this. Administrators and professionals are to reply, "By law, we can't discuss this with anyone except the student," to everything. But half the time that just ticks the parent off even more because, after all, I'm paying tuition. He'll take what I want him to take. My parents were pretty bat-crap crazy about parenting. As I got older, they got more and more crazy. They wouldn't let me move out to go to uni at 18, so I ended up living at home. They wouldn't let me date. They'd have crazy arguments and occasionally get physical with me if they discovered I'd spoken to a boy. They limited my time on the internet, confiscated my phone, even after I was an adult, and paid for the phone myself. Last year I left home and they called the police reporting me missing and wasted a lot of police time. They turned up at my boyfriend's house 4 hours away where I was staying. We had to call the police who escorted us away somewhere safer. They constantly hounded me with calls and texts. I went to see them 2 months later, and they locked me into my old bedroom, and my boyfriend had to call the police again so I could leave without them hurting me. I went back in February to collect clothes and some belongings and had to have the police escort me there. I'm glad I did, because they decided to have a huge family gathering and wanted to ambush me when I got there. I saw them once in June when they came to see me. I didn't let them know where I lived, and I met them for half an hour in the park, and stuff got seriously nasty again, so I left. Interesting in a number of ways. For one, this is maybe our only first-hand account so far, but I think the far more interesting aspect is that these guys got worse as you aged, rather than simply continuing to treat you as the baby they always saw you as. Good on you for knowing how and when to GTFO. Speaking as a teacher, so many. Especially when I was teaching pre-kindergarten. One mum wanted to pay for us to have cameras in our center so she could see what her kid was doing throughout the day. I said no. She decided she'd visit our school 4 times a day instead. Once for drop-off, before nap, after nap, and pick-up. Kid on my youth hockey team wasn't allowed to get dressed in the locker room. His parents made him dress in gear at home and then ride in the backseat only to the game. More details, my parents were friendly with his parents, so every once in a while I'd have to catch a ride with them if my parents couldn't take me, and I wasn't allowed to dress in the locker room either. This wasn't a case of embarrassment or transgender stuff, as I remembered him asking to be allowed in the locker room. Just a case of overprotection from being the only child, I guess. This continued into middle school. I worked at a dining hall in college, and one parent called our manager to complain that her son wasn't getting big enough pieces of chicken in his General Tso's. Sorry your little boy isn't getting enough protein to grow up big and strong like his dad. I work for the help desk at a university, and I get disgusted with some of the parents that call in. Most of the time they wanted me to give them Junior's password so that they can see his homework, grades, and classes. We have a separate login system for financial aid-related stuff, but these parents want to have the full password. Some things I've heard include, but are not limited to, but I'm paying for him to be there, so I should have access. I am his mother, and I need to know what he's up to. I just want to make sure he's taking the right classes. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to tell these people to cut the umbilical cord, but I can't give them the password either. I've been yelled at a few times. Just to make a point, I've never had a father call in and ask for this. I've had hundreds of mothers, though. My aunt gives my 8-year-old cousin a walkie-talkie when he goes a couple of houses over to his friend's house to play. She then sits on her front porch and checks in every minute or two. It's hilarious. One day, some years ago, I got the following email out of the blue. Hi Stephen, your parents sent me a package with your information and pictures and a letter saying they wanted to set us up. As flattered as I am, I'm in a committed relationship right now. I'm also only 21 years old and I'm not looking to get married or have children anytime soon, which your parents made clear was your intention. I'm sorry, but this isn't something I'm interested in. I wish you good luck in your endeavors. Yes, my parents did that, seriously. Are you Indian? Because my parents did this too. My fiancé had a friend in college who was obscenely rich and got packages like that all the time from families trying to arrange marriages with him. He'd get expensive jewelry and all kinds of gifts with notes saying, "Please consider my daughter for marriage." So my fiancé would mess with him by buying knickknacks from the dollar store, packaging them and leaving them in his mailbox with notes that said, "Please consider her name for marriage. Enclosed is a small novelty squirt gun." She'd address the packages and notes as if they came from her parents. Okay, it's not as bad as some of these, but I once got a phone call from a parent screaming at me asking why her daughter wasn't allowed to swim in a competition coming up that weekend. She wouldn't let me get a word in to explain that I was not, in fact, her daughter's swim coach. I'm not a swim coach at all. Her coach had the same name as me and was even the same age, but still lived with his parents. So mine was the only phone number in the phone book with my name. This was over 10 years ago. She went on for about 5 minutes explaining that she watches all of the kids swimming and her daughter was definitely the strongest in her group. I was so mad, I simply agreed and told her that her daughter would definitely be swimming this weekend. She congratulated me on making the right decision and hung up. I really wish I could have seen what happened. Just a few months ago, while I was working my custodian job at my school's student union, a worried mum approached me. She told me she had lost her daughter and that she was lost. She tried calling her and she didn't answer. I took it very seriously and asked her where she was supposed to be. She said at one of the dorms. Eventually, the daughter calls and said she's separated, and the mum tells me she's scared and alone. We leave the union building in search of her daughter and we arrive at the dorm. I then begin to notice that it's full of group leaders and new students, and it clicks that her daughter is 18 years old and the mum was overreacting. I just wasted 20 minutes helping a way too worried mum find her college-age daughter. I really thought a little kid was lost. I blame working retail prior to this job. In short, mum told me her kid was lost, but kid was a freshman. One of my friends has to call his parents every single day, dutifully, and describe how his day was. One time, he couldn't call the parents due to no network, and the next day his parents sent him on a guilt trip saying how irresponsible he was and how his mother was worried sick. He'll turn 32 now and oddly seems to be okay with all of this. Every time he's troubled, he expects daddy's help. My aunt hasn't let my cousin, who's 11, go to any birthday parties besides his own, or go to any parks because she's afraid he'll get sick from the other kids. Also, he still sleeps with my aunt and uncle in their bed.
On my grandmother's deathbed, she asked me, "Do you know who your real mother is? What major plot twist moment have you had in your life?" My grandmother passed away just over 2 weeks ago. The family all went to see her for the last time. She was surprisingly aware of everything around her and telling stories and joking. I went and sat by her and we talked for a little while about various things. Out of nowhere, she said, "Do you know who your real mother is?" Now, I've only ever known one woman to be my mother and had never considered otherwise. I was shocked and asked her to repeat herself, thinking I misheard her. She said it again. "Do you know who your real mother is?" I looked over to my aunt with a confused look on my face who, addressing my grandmother, said, "Blank is his mother, Nanny." My grandmother laughed for a second and said, "Oh yeah, I guess I know who your mother is too." Now, I'm fairly certain my mother is actually my mother. Since then, I've been trying to justify her saying that though. All I can think is either she was very out of it and didn't know what she was saying, or there's someone else in my family who doesn't know their real mother and she mistook me for them. I'm not sure I should pursue this any further with my family, as any reason to keep it secret is probably a decent one, and I'm not so sure I want to know the answer. But it also has me wondering, has anyone else had a major plot twist moment in their lives, whether it turned out to be true or not? My grandfather was dying of cancer. He was a big, tough man and gradually just wasted away. Sometime near the end, he asked my grandmother to bring him a piece of paper and a pen. He wrote down all the names of his 27 grandchildren. Next to my name was a check. Nobody else had anything next to their names. My grandmother showed it to me after he died. She had no idea what it meant. I still think about it every once in a while. When I was 15, my siblings and I were put into foster care. We had no idea why until the social worker told us that our parents were using drugs, our after-school jobs were helping them pay for drugs when they said our money was being saved, my dad wasn't my real dad, and 3 out of my 5 siblings were my half-siblings, and my real dad kidnapped my brother and I when we were babies. We were returned to my mom when he confessed to murdering a woman and then went to jail. He had since been released, and we visited him to discover that he'd started another family. It was quite the mind freak. My grandpa was having trouble hearing and it took us a while to convince him to get a hearing aid. In the meantime, he got a phone call saying his Uncle John had died. He asked about a funeral and was told there wasn't one. That was 2, maybe 3 years ago. I really only saw John when he came up for Christmas, but he was quite the character and my whole family missed him. A couple weeks ago, my grandpa's cousin came to visit me. Grandpa was talking about how he missed John since he died. His cousin said, "What are you talking about? I just saw him 2 weeks ago." Turns out my grandpa misheard the phone call. We figure someone else died, but we still don't know who. John's probably been wondering why no one invites him for Christmas anymore, or visits, or calls. My twin sister and I were born through in vitro fertilization. Our mom wanted nothing more than to have kids, and her circumstances led her to use a sperm donor. When we were 3 years old, our mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. When we were 6, she passed away. My sister and I were taken in by our aunt, our mom's younger sister. She already had 2 sons and a husband. It was a crazy and emotional time for all of us, but we've become an amazing family unit, and I consider my mom, dad, and brothers as much my immediate family as my sister. You might think this was the major plot twist in my life, but it gets crazier. About 4 years ago, I learned that not only did my original mother have sperm donated to her, but she also had eggs donated to her as well, by her little sister. I lost my biological mom only to be rescued by my genetic mom. All those years I had laughed at people who said I looked like my brothers and my mom, but the joke was on me. When I think about the sacrifices my 2 moms have made for me and my sister, it blows my mind. I like that this one has a nice happy ending. A lot of the time, a story like this doesn't. I was looking for my social security card in my parents' desk and I found their marriage certificate. It was dated 1 year later than I thought, 6 months before I was born. All of a sudden, the years of thinking my mother resented being stuck home with the kids, the terrible, resentful marriage they had, it all made sense. I actually found out shortly after my grandmother died that she and her husband adopted my mom. From where or why, we have no idea. Mom and I know that we have the same type of ethnic heritage as the people she thought were her parents, which probably indicates she was adopted from somewhere within the family or close friends at least. Perhaps more interesting is the fact that on her deathbed, I was 100% convinced that my grandma was saying I love you and gathered the whole family to hear, only to realize that she was just desperately thirsty and saying, I want juice. Back when I was in college, I got a girl pregnant. When my mother found out, she broke down crying and divulged that I have a brother out there that I had never met. She'd given the boy up for adoption long before I came around. I still wonder to this day if I'll ever run into him. When I was a kid, my parents took me to Universal Studios in LA. When we were there, we met Mr. T, and I spent the next 20 years telling my friends that I had met Mr. T. Everything came crashing down when I had dinner one night with my parents and a girlfriend. The topic of meeting famous people came up, and I told my Mr. T story. My parents chuckled and corrected me, "You mean you met a character impersonator playing Mr. T? Childhood ruined." Oh, that really sucks. I think we all have at least one story like this. When I was 12 or 13, my parents took me out to eat at a restaurant. My dad gave me some change to go play a couple arcade games there, and when I ran out of money, I sat back down. My parents had completely serious looks on their faces, and my dad asked me, "How would you react if we told you that you were adopted?" I freaked out a bit, and then they moved on to a different topic. I wondered about it for years until I realized I act just like my dad and I look like both my mom and my dad. When I was 7, I found my birth certificate in the basement of my childhood home. The name under father was not the man I'd believed to be my dad my entire life. I didn't tell anyone about it for years. Not exactly major, but when my sister needed a passport, she had to have the signatures of both legal parents. That's when we found out her only legal parent is our mom. Dad just never got around to signing the papers. Worked out well, since only needing one signature made it a lot faster. The largest one for me was finding out my parents were never married, although together for 15 plus years, because my father was still technically married to his first wife, who miraculously got pregnant and had a child while he was in jail for a year for aiding and abetting a known felon. He's a former Kentucky hillbilly that used to run moonshine back in the day. He refused to turn in his cousin. Multiple things occurred to me that day. 1, my dad is a felon. 2, I'm a bastard. 3, I have a not quite half sister somewhere. 4, my mother basically had a long affair with my father. And 5, I hope like heck there is no inbreeding somewhere, because this story is the epitome of the stereotypes I had heard. So recently I helped clean out my parents' basement since they really needed it. That place was a mess. I find a box with a bunch of pictures in it and begin to reminisce about how awesome my childhood was. Me on the NES, me at Disney World, my brother and I at a football game. But then I get to the last picture on the bottom. It's my dad, my mom, and some random chick that looked to be in her early 20s. The picture, judging by the hair, was taken mid to late 80s and early 90s. "Hey Dad," I called. Mom was out of the house. "What?" he yelled from upstairs. "Who's in this picture?" I went upstairs to show him. He stared at it for a moment, blinked, and said, "That's your half-sister Andrea." What? I pursue it more. Half-sister? What are you talking about? I then proceeded to find out that he'd been married before when he was 18 to some stripper from Vegas. He lived in Arizona until he was about 30. Lorelei, or her stripper name, Karma, had been married to him for about a year until he realized she was a shopaholic, shoplifting, dealing drugs, taking drugs, and was abusive to her daughter. He got the heck out and gave the child to his parents to raise since he was 19 years old. Now I have a half-sister I plan to meet. I found out my stepfather was my biological father, whilst who I thought was my dad was still actively in my life. Okay, it's complex, so I'll break it down. I was born to my mother and her husband, we'll call him Roger. So Mom and Roger were my parents. I grew up thinking Roger was my dad. I knew of nothing else other than these two as my birth parents. When I was 4, my mom and Roger got divorced. My older siblings were always allowed to go visiting Roger, and I rarely got to. I grew up desperately wanting to see my dad Roger. When I was 7, my mother married a new man who became my stepfather. We'll call him Bob. So I grew up with Bob being a great stepdad to me, but it always hurt that I never saw my dad Roger. And as I got older, I got angrier and angrier that I never got to see my dad Roger. Because hey, what kid who loves their dad wouldn't be? So one day after I hit puberty around 12, Bob and I got into a fight and he was telling me off and I pulled out the "You're not my real dad" line, which cued my mother and Bob to sit me down and tell me that Bob is my biological father and that Roger's not my father, only a man I was led to believe was my biological father in order to keep up appearances to the outside world. My dad is a real-life superhero. He has graphic synesthesia. He sees numbers as colors and shapes because those sections of his brain are connected in ways normal people's aren't. And he used that to catch a man who was skimming accounts when he worked at a bank. So my dad worked at a bank and for fun, he'd scroll down through the account balances and watch the patterns of color. He did this just about every day, and over time, he noticed more and more zeros. They stood out because they're empty space to him and it looks ugly. He was noticing this in a couple thousand accounts too. Just a few black spaces at the ends of strings of color. He took it to the police because his boss wasn't listening to him. Turns out his boss was the guy skimming the accounts. But the police never took the investigation seriously until my dad compiled the evidence on his own and took it to them. My dad's a cool guy. This one is actually a really cool and interesting story. People are just awesome. While at a party about 5 years ago, I met a girl who I really clicked with. Friends-wise, I'm a girl. I started talking about my boyfriend, but not by that title, by name. She proceeded to tell me she knew him and had actually recently been on a date with him, and how it was the most romantic date she'd ever been on. My boyfriend. Of a year. Yeah, it just got real. Yes, we broke up shortly afterwards. That girl ended up being one of my best friends, and we're still friends to this day. I met a girl at a bar while my boyfriend and a group of friends and me and this girl hit it off. We drank and laughed all night long. We became Facebook friends and ended up hanging out fairly often. I considered her one of my favorite people to be around. One day, she blocked me on Facebook and stopped talking to me. I was hurt and confused. Me and my boyfriend lived together and I told him about it and all he really said was, "Oh, weird. Well, screw her." Plot twist? My boyfriend of 4 years had gotten her pregnant. Eesh. Me and the boyfriend split up, obviously, and now her, my ex, and their kid live with his uncle in a trailer park. Second plot twist. After we split, I was depressed, went on a huge drinking binge, met the lead singer of my all-time favorite band at a show, we hit it off, I quit drinking, and now I'm happily married to a guy I had a crush on for 10 years. Well, that one was a little bit of a roller coaster. At least the original poster ended up happy. Sounds like maybe the ex not so much. The day we found out that the doctors were going to stop being aggressive with my father's treatment was very difficult. My grandparents flew back from Florida to get his affairs in order. Apparently, my dad, a near-broke alcoholic, had not paid any of his life insurance premiums. My grandparents found out and paid all the late bills, which allowed my siblings to collect on the multi-million-dollar policy. To this day, I'm grateful because I didn't find out until a few days after about the whole situation. Now, I have enough money to pay for college and buy my first home. One of my cousins does not have the same father as her sisters. Their father found a handwritten note in which their mother wrote about her affair, the pregnancy, and then confronted her about it. They ended up staying married and are currently married to this day. My mother and father found out and told me a few years ago. It was a slip-up that I continually pursued until I got the answers. There are only 5 of us in the entire family that know. Me, my mother, my father, and the cousin's parents. The girl and her sisters have no idea. Mine was finding out the woman I called mom for the first 16 years of my life was actually my gran, and that my older sister was my birth mom. Apparently, she got pregnant when she was 13, so her mom decided to raise me. Now, I've got no idea what to call either of them. Calling my big sister mom just feels weird. I found out while my uncle was on his deathbed that he had a secret family with adult children. Mind you, this is the classic drunk uncle who lived alone or just had a live-in girlfriend or wife from time to time, but came to every family function. Nobody knew. Not his sisters, not even his mother. We still dispute this family because when we did ask my uncle, he just said, it's not a big deal. What the heck? This isn't really about me, but rather a friend of mine. I think to this day he still doesn't know this. My mother's good friends with his mother, which is how we met. And one day his mother tells my mother that the man we've all believed to be his father isn't really his father. And even he, the supposed father, doesn't even know it, because she was officially dating him back then, but was cheating on him with the real father of the child. She said the real father ended up dying before the child was ever born, I believe in a car accident, and so she raised the child as the son of the man who she would go on to marry, and later divorce. Earlier this last year, I was hit up by a guy on Facebook claiming to be my half-brother. Fast forward a bit, and it turns out to be true. I don't know the details of the hows and whys, as every story has multiple sides, but my twin brother and I have been raised our whole lives, 23 years, by a wonderful man whom is the biological father of our older brother. There was never any hint or doubt that our dad wasn't our biological father, and we were raised with the utmost love and care by him, even though he and my mother were divorced or separated throughout the entirety of our lives. My father even had a fiance leave him at one point because she was apparently unhappy that he was paying family support for kids that weren't technically of his biology. He really sacrificed a lot for us, and I couldn't have asked for a better dad. Hasn't changed much in my life, honestly, and I never had any real crisis of conscience or identity about it because, hey, that sounds about right given my family history. Nonetheless, I'd say that counts as a nice little twist. When my grandfather was on his deathbed, he was very much aware of what he was saying and doing. He talked to each of the family members that were there privately. When I went in to see him, we talked for what seemed to be hours, joking as if it was another one of our every other weekend camping trips. It was very strange to know he would just be a lifeless shell of what he used to be. He put his hand on the back of my neck and told me I was about to go through the toughest 4 years of my life and to not act on my depressive actions. I left the room confused and broken. He passed within half an hour. The next 4 years and counting have been hell. My immediate family found out my father had been cheating on my mother and just messed with our emotions and thoughts over the course of a year and a bit. I failed to get my high school diploma, so I started to work full time to pay for our home. Not as big of a plot twist as some of those on here, but his words kept me from doing some pretty extreme things. Lots of downer stories in this thread, so here's a slightly more fun plot twist. I've always loved choreography. I was never much of a dancer myself, but I loved ballet and musical theater growing up. It branched into other avenues too, like martial arts and animation, which led to me becoming a comic artist. I never had anyone in my family to really relate these passions to, until on his deathbed, my grandfather started telling me stories I never heard before, about being both a boxer and a dancer. It may not sound like a big plot twist, but believe me when I say it felt like one at the time. We became really good friends all of a sudden, and in his very last days on Earth. I was so glad to make that connection with him before he left. I found out just last week that all my life, my mother's been addicted to drugs and has been hiding her addiction from my sister and I as best she could. On top of that, every single night she takes sleeping pills. I also learned that her family's convincing her to lie to my father and continue her addiction instead of getting help, purely to spite my father. I'd always suspected my mother had a drug problem, but never brought it up. My sister is still in the dark, and I intend to keep it that way. For now, I'm just watching my mother slowly wither away. Not me, but a friend of mine in high school. So my friend was adopted when she was pretty young. Doesn't know any of her biological family. My friend is a typical high school girl. Likes to go to the mall and whatnot. Every time she's there, she gets guys hitting on her saying how they know her from somewhere or something like that. She doesn't think much of it. She's a cute girl, so it happens often enough everywhere. As time passes, she notices a bunch more people saying they know her at the mall and call her by a different name. She eventually gets talking to one person and they swear they know someone who looks exactly like her. Turns out she had a twin that was also adopted and they were separated at birth. I had always been told both my grandfathers had died before I was born, and I never felt like there was any reason to question it. Fast forward 20 years and suddenly a man who looks identical to my dad shows up. It's my granddad. Turned out he had an affair with my nan when they were both married to other people and she became pregnant with my dad. My parents separated a while ago and I never had actually seen their wedding photos. I finally found one and saw my mom in her wedding dress, but she was holding my older sister, who looked about 3, making me about 1, or at least born for that matter. I thought there was a family secret until my mom told me she'd married my dad before a judge, and this picture was from the actual ceremony, which took place years later. My wife has a large family, lots of aunts, uncles, great uncles, etc. Family reunion attendance numbers in the hundreds. So there was one of my wife's great aunts, Aunt Vita. She wasn't well known to the family, but a few decades after she died, my wife's cousin is doing some family history, and a story comes out. Turns out, Vita was, in her early life, a mortician's assistant. Then she was hired by the state in the late 1800s, early 1900s as a hangman's assistant, and then she got promoted. Apparently, she didn't do a lot of work. Hanging as a form of capital punishment was being phased out by the early 1900s. She still had her title and salary though. After she died in Minneapolis, she was buried there. Eventually, the family wanted her grave moved down to the family gravesite in Iowa. When they unearthed the coffin, the lid fell open and they discovered possibly the most disturbing thing about Aunt Vita's life: scratch marks on the inside of the lid. After reading this in my cousin's notes, my wife turned 3 shades of pale, calmed down a bit, and then said, "Well, that's karma." My grandfather's sister had a heart attack, and I was telling my mother that we should all do a check. This kind of thing tends to run in the family. At that point, my mother told me that my real grandfather wasn't the one we thought. Her biological father was a Jew who was deported to a lager during the fascist period in Italy, and my grandmother, pregnant at the time, never saw him again. This is also the reason why my grandmother during the war hid many Jew families in Venice, under the roof of her house where they lived in Campo Sant'Angelo, despite the danger of being arrested and deported as well. This is not really a plot twist, but a funny last word story. My grandpa never really watched the news, but he liked to stay informed on the things the kids are watching these days. So I would always tell him about the modern headlines and whatever everyone was talking about. I also started watching South Park with him, since it always dealt with what was happening at the time the episode was created. He liked the show a lot and we started watching it on Netflix. When he watched The Succubus, he couldn't stop laughing at Tree Fitty. And that was sort of our main joke. No one else in the family knew what the heck we were talking about. We would always randomly say he would need about Tree Fitty, and I would read him Reddit and 4chan stories that lead up to Tree Fitty jokes. In August of this year, I was told his lifelong habit of smoking caught up with him and his lung cancer was serious now. He could have gotten treated, but he didn't want to. He wanted to pass away in his home with his family and loved ones. When we talked for the last time, we did the usual crying and everything, but after I sort of stopped crying, hysterically he said, "I'm gonna need one last thing from you." Unsuspecting me asked him what he wanted, anything at all. And he said, "Tree Fitty," and fake died. I stared at him for about 30 seconds in confusion before he said, "Nah, I'm kidding. Go bring your sister in here." I love my grandpa.
What does your family do that you didn't realize was bizarre until later on in life? Okay, so my mom was a pretty crappy parent. She didn't really teach me a lot and I was left alone most of the time. Most of the things I learned were from my cousin because she paid her to watch me while she would go to work or be messed up somewhere. I don't know. Never took me to an amusement park or anything. It was all my cousin. Anyway, as a kid, I firmly believed in Santa Claus, and that was because my mom didn't buy me Jack as a kid. It was always my cousin getting me things and taking me places, and for Christmas I would always get really good things. Like I would get a PS2, games I really wanted, a stereo, etc. $700 a month disability money because I'm disabled. Anyways, for those reasons, I firmly believed in Santa Claus, and I remember vividly kids in middle school telling me it was my mom, and I 100% did not believe in them to the point I started crying about it. All the cool gifts were from Santa as well, by the way. All the gifts my mom would get me were socks, shirts, etc. My mom also reinforced that Santa was real. Hell, I believed in the Tooth Fairy for the same reason, since I'd get $5 for every tooth I lost. Fast forward to just recently-ish, I'm 26, and I find out all the gifts from Santa were from my cousin and her mom. They would give my mom gifts for me every year, and every year my mom would take off the name tag and replace them with Santa. I even remember her telling me how specifically my cousin and aunt didn't get me any Christmas gifts while growing up. I feel like she felt inferior or something because my cousin cared more about me and got me expensive gifts. When I grew grew out of the Santa thing, I actually believed my mom got me all those gifts and was using my disability money for them. Cause like, every year I'd get a ton of good stuff. It now makes a lot more sense. My cousin always knew what stuff I liked cause we liked the same things. I even remember the year I got a GameCube and how whenever I'd go to her house, I'd want to play her GameCube to play Harvest Moon. And that Christmas, what game did I get with my GameCube? Harvest Moon. I never told my mom I wanted Harvest Moon. It was only my cousin that knew. So I fervently believed it was Santa that knew I wanted it through magic or whatever. Really bad that my mom did that to my cousin and her mom, but this isn't even the worst thing she'd done. I could write a book about how terrible a person she is. So I wouldn't have said the mom was that bad until they mentioned that they were actively hiding the cousin and aunt were buying them gifts. That bit was like, ooh, okay, maybe she is that bad. Because not buying luxury items isn't a terrible thing. That's what it is. It's a luxury. It's not a basic necessity or anything like that. Because basic necessities, when you get older, you realize that's what matters. When you're a kid, you're all about the PlayStation 2. When you're adult, you're like, oh yes, socks and underwear for Christmas. Ooh. Maybe more context is needed, but yeah, it does sound like they kinda sucked.
To keep me from watching too much TV, my dad told me that we had a 1 hour limit on our TV viewing. As in, we paid for 1 hour of TV per day, and any more than that we would be charged extra for. Like AOL back in the day. When I started going to friends' houses where the TV was always on, I got a bit suspicious, but I just figured they had more money than we did. Eventually, after watching TV for hours and hours with one friend, I asked her how much TV they paid for, and she just looked at me like I was nuts. So I guess lying to your kids because it's easier than getting into a fight over a rule you want to enforce is the bizarre thing my family did.
I'm of two minds on this one. 1, obviously it's not good to lie to your children. 2, I don't blame them if they wanted them to get away from the TV and go out and be active and stuff, because a prevalent issue nowadays is people having too much screen time. Like, I see some parents out and about, they hand their babies mobile phones and stuff. It's like, what the hell? I understand if they've got like learning programs on there or things specifically for them, but I just don't think it's very good for their development. I don't think kids should be raised on technology. I only got a phone. Granted, I got a phone in like 2006. I got a little flip Nokia. It was a basic phone. Had nothing else, that's all I used it for. But now I just feel like phones and tablets and stuff, when they just hand it off to their kids, it just feels like they're trying to distract them and not engage with them or teach them anything themselves. You're supposed to be there for them. You're supposed to engage with your kids, for God's sake. Anyway, that's just a little rant I've got, I guess.
Having no shame being nude. At least in America, that's weird. Granted, my father was not wandering the house nude as he has all daughters, but my mother, 0 craps given. My sister, mom, and I just have no shame. I'm eating breakfast. Mom wanders into the kitchen naked to do her neti pot thing. I'm trying to take a bath. Here's mom or sissy trying to have a conversation. Walk into mom's bathroom. Literally every door leading there wide open. Mom taking a bath. Stop and have a chat. Same with my sister. I've had so many damn bathtub conversations with my sister and mom. Also, my mom's total nonchalance about being naked around my best girlfriend. No, they weren't uncomfortable. She asked or warned them. She just wanders around naked sometimes. So now I'm just always naked in my own home. Blinds open or not, I literally just don't even notice. Being nude is just my inherent natural state.
I mean, TMI, but if absolutely no one is around and whatnot, yeah, it's pretty nice to walk around in the nude, but like when there's company about, it's like, well, it's a bit weird, yeah, like that's my standard, you know, I'm not gonna enforce my standard on people, but, you know, kind of weird.
Yeah, my boyfriend found this super weird and gets upset that I don't close the bathroom door all the way. He had 4 cats and my parents had 4 daughters with 1 bathroom. Privacy while you pooped was just not happening. I'm almost 30 and still find myself wandering into the bathroom while my mom's doing her thing when I visit to chat. It's just our normal. Also, my dad never wore pants when he was home. Tidy whities and a shirt is how most of my friends met him. I remember one of my sisters pleading with him to put on pants because her boyfriend was coming over, and he was just like, I pay the mortgage. I don't have to wear pants, which has become my life creed.
You heard the man, love. He pays the mortgage. Now, I agree, though. When company is coming around, just put some freaking trousers on. Here's the thing. Here's the rule. Shirtless, all right. Pantsless? Nah, that's a no-go. Not when company's about.
When I was younger, my whole extended family, except the ones in Germany, would share a farm together and go there on the weekends. We would spend the whole day weeding, raking, other chores, and goofing off outside. And at night, we would eat only potatoes and gravy, and the men would drink beer. After that, all of us kids would go into the living room and watch VHS tapes of adult movies that were probably too inappropriate for us to be watching at that age. We would do this till 11 while the adults talked and played games, and then we would all go home as my grandmother and grandfather were the only people who lived there permanently. That farm has been in the family for a long time.
That sounds like a damn good time, a hootenanny even. I'd love to go to a farm and get drunk with my relatives, talk, play games, drink beer. I mean, maybe not beer, I'm more of a cocktails guy and all that. Or watch inappropriate movies and stuff. I don't know if he meant adult movies or he meant more just inappropriate films for kids like Final Destination, or as I would be watching when I was 10 years old, From Dusk Till Dawn. That's a great film. I freaking love that movie.
My mom would let me and my brother run around naked for about 10 minutes before our bath, around ages 2 to 3, so we wouldn't want to take our clothes off in front of company, because she read that some titlers do that, but creating a time to be naked stopped it, I guess, and she didn't want to risk it or something. And she also would give us our popsicles in the bath or shower until we were about 4, so she could just hose us down and we didn't get everything sticky while eating.
I don't actually blame her. Lollipops, anything like a popsicle or a lollipop, you gotta be careful with kids. I know until the age of 5 or 6, I think, I could not be trusted with a lollipop. I would get sticky. I'd be holding it at arm's length, and then next thing I know, what the hell's going on with my hair? Why is my hair sticky? I didn't put it anywhere near my head. My hair's all sticky, and my mom and my brother would be all, "Get your rollers out, Edna," because I had long, gorgeous blonde locks, and they'd get all curled up and sticky and horrible. I'd hate it. I'd cry even. When we watched movies, we would discuss what was happening, what we thought of the characters, or just random things that we thought of during the movie. When I would watch movies at my friend's house, they found this very annoying, and I didn't realize people just sat in complete silence for 2 hours. I have since broken the habit, mostly, but when I meet up with my family, it's the same as it used to be. I also do this with very specific people that are down for it. I have a friend who I watch a movie and a bunch of anime with on weekends and stuff. When we have the time, we get together, we just watch random stuff. We've been watching Back to the Future. We recently watched Homeward Bound, which was a lot less sad than I thought it was gonna be. He wanted to make me cry. And we just comment on things, make jokes every now and then. It's just a thing that we do. Otherwise, though, I am perfectly fine to sit in complete silence while watching a film. Cult stuff. I didn't know it was a cult until I became an adult, grew up in a Christian group. They had their own church and school. I wasn't allowed to talk to people from outside both church and school my whole childhood. Even neighbors I got in trouble for. This is the kind that teaches you homosexuality is evil, Pope is evil, Obama is evil, Trump is evil. Hell, I got a detention for using female hair products because it was gay, and that was 2011 in Canada. It was crappy, I guess, but the time I tried to self-delete with a bottle of whiskey, my parents' response was to ground me for life because I went and partied. I told them why I did it. They sent an elder from the church to talk to me, and the grounding remained. They had their own business too, so at 16 you'd work and get paid normally for the church folk. Being an adult, I left, but I had no clue just how sheltered it is, and how crazy sheltered I was as a kid. 20 is when I got away, and it was like this magical adventure world where nothing was like it was supposed to be. That sounds like utter hell, and although this was about Christianity specifically, I want people to remember no matter what part of the political or religious spectrum you are on and what you believe in, if you are too dedicated to a specific ideology in which you put it before the people around you, the people that care and love you, you're going to taint, corrupt, and hurt those around you, and probably just ruin any impression that people have of you and what you believe in, and that goes for everyone.
Not brushing teeth. We were never taught to actually make a habit out of brushing our teeth growing up. Our parents didn't either. We used to get shown those fun educational videos in school when we were kids. The ones with the big cartoon toothbrush who tells you how to brush your teeth. But I never actually took them seriously. I thought toothbrushing was just something people on TV did, not an actual real thing, until my first sleepover with a friend around 5th or 6th grade. We were getting ready to go to sleep and I looked at her like she was crazy because she was actually brushing her teeth. And she looked at me like I was crazy because I wasn't brushing
brushing my teeth. I didn't have many sleepovers as a kid, so I just put it down to sleepover weirdness and carried on not brushing my teeth until I started getting tooth pains in my late teens. Went to the dentist. He asked when the last time I'd brushed was, and I swear he nearly fainted when I answered. Safe to say I brush my teeth now, but a less gross one, maths. When my siblings and I were little, our mother used to make up maths worksheets for us to do. She'd sit down and handwrite a bunch of simple, real simple, we were kids, maths questions down. Give us a sheet each and just let us work through them. It wasn't forced or anything, though. We never had to do it, but we wanted to. It was like a game to us. We'd ask her to do it for us. I didn't realize that not everyone's mother would do that or read to them each night before bed. Even my first teacher commented on how much further along my reading was than the other kids when I first started school. I thought this stuff was standard until I started talking to other kids about it and realized nobody else in my class did it.
Save for the disregard for oral hygiene, which, by the way, kids, seriously, brush your teeth every day. Make sure your mouth is clean and healthy. It is important. You can get sick, and I think in some cases you can even die if your mouth is, like, really badly kept. But that's the extreme. And on the other hand, though, these parents are clearly engaged in wanting to teach their kids stuff. I mean, that's a problem that I've talked about before, I think. A lot of parents just aren't engaging with their kids and actively trying to teach them stuff. I have a close personal friend who was a primary school teacher for a while, and she told me about a couple kids who didn't have, like, major learning difficulties or anything, just didn't know how to wipe their butts because their parents just didn't bother to teach them how. Neglect is a form of abuse, people.
When I was a kid, we opened all of our Christmas presents after dinner on Christmas night. All of my friends opened them on Christmas morning or sometimes even Christmas Eve. But we waited with all of the family, including grandparents and aunts and uncles and the whole damn fam. Dinner was eaten, dishes were done, drinks were served, and we all sat together for several hours and opened Christmas presents. I don't do that with my own family now, but I do kind of miss the tradition.
I frickin' love Christmas. Christmas frickin' rocks. I'm not like fanatical about it, but I like it. I love the atmosphere, the snow, the goodwill, and cartoon Christmas specials back in the day absolutely rocked. My mother is a member of the Slavic pagan cult. In my childhood, there was nothing strange for me in bloody sacrifices for different gods. It was a bit of a holiday for me. In the courtyard, we had an altar where mother often performed rituals. However, in the end, my father could not stand this pizdiets and broke up with her. But now I can easily write fantasy books on the knowledge that I received in my childhood. I even tried in Russian. I am from Russia, but I am not very good at composing stories. And no, it had no effect on my mind. Unless I'm not so worried because of blood, death, etc. I am not cruel. I have quite normal relations with people around me. Now I am 22 and I am IT student, and of course I am not pagan. By itself, the sacrifices were hens, pigs, and other livestock animals. Most often they were not for the fire god, so most often this event ended in a feast. I actually once went on a date with a woman who claimed to be a practicing pagan. I mean, paganism itself is an umbrella term for a few different things that have either been discarded or forgotten, and people don't really talk about that much openly, but I don't know, the whole concept seems kinda cool to me. All different gods respecting nature and all that. I don't know if it's bizarre, but my parents had arguments in front of us when we were kids. Not knockdown, drag-out fights or anything, but they disagree and hash it out verbally, sometimes loudly. Now that I'm married and have grown-up friends and such, almost my entire social circle never saw their parents argue or fight. I'll be honest, I have witnessed some awful arguments and fights between my parents, but I do know someone whose parents literally never argued in front of them, and they are simultaneously the least confrontational but also most dangerous person I know, because they literally study the way of the blade. They do Bushido stuff. The man can roll into a stance while holding a samurai sword and slash that thing out smooth as butter. I have held his katanas. They are authentic and sharp, and I also had the honor of attending his daughter's christening very recently. Confrontation is an inevitable thing, people. You should be prepared for it in all manners, whether it just be an argument or whether it be someone actually trying to cause real physical harm to you. Because some people just freak out over the most mundane things, and you know what, maybe that's part of the reason why. Your parents didn't argue enough in front of you. It's a regular thing that happens. Arguments can sometimes be the way that you can solve problems.
I had a less than traditional upbringing due to my 2 juvenile delinquent older sisters, but despite all of that, my family has always been very full of love. Every goodbye or goodnight was always accompanied by, I love you. It wasn't until I started dating my now husband that I realized not all families do this. He'd get off the phone with his mom and just say, bye, and I'd be shocked at the rudeness of it. He's adopted the habit with me now because I've never stopped. I've always felt loved by my parents no matter what was going on because of the constant effort to remind ourselves that we love one another.
Solidarity, sister. I literally do the same thing with my family and even my very close friends. I believe that anything can happen. I could be snatched from this existence at any point for any reason. So I let those around me who I truly, deeply care about know that I love them, even if it might be a bit embarrassing for them when I say it to them in public.
I just realized today, probably not that strange, but my family would go to the movie theater when we knew it was going to be a rainy or stormy day. We would go see a movie and then look at the weather, and if it was still bad outside, we would just hop into another movie. I never knew it was wrong or anything. I was like, sweet, we get to watch more movies. Never got caught as I remember, but I'd never be bold enough to do it now.
Sneaking into a film isn't the worst thing I can think of, but I have never done it and I don't intend to because I have a lot more respect for my local establishments. Because the fact of the matter is, people, if these places don't make money, then they just disappear. And then suddenly, oh, you live in a food desert. Or, oh, there's nothing to do. And then a big shadowy corporation buy up the property for a cheap price and then build houses. They own the houses, price up those houses. And people can't actually afford to buy them, and then they're renting those places forever. Men were considered inferior and violent. We weren't allowed anything resembling a weapon, including army men. Weren't allowed violent toys, no sugar, very rarely allowed time with friends. Most mornings I'd wake up to find I was grounded for one reason or another, along with my brother, and we were locked in the room all day. Food and water twice a day, bathroom at the same time. No blinds or curtains, no beds. We were allowed a mattress. If we were allowed outside, it was to do chores, usually the more physical ones like weeding or picking up rocks. I still have panic attacks if I feel trapped. When I stayed in the hospital overnight last year, they were kind enough to help me walk around so I wouldn't stress out, but it was a bloody awful experience. Anyway, I assumed all families were absolutely horrible and this was pretty normal until I actually spoke to people about it. My grandmother raised me, and I keep this light orb thing I made of her ashes as a nightlight to remind myself that even the worst pieces of crap can be useful. I defer back to my comment earlier about how extreme ideologies can really corrupt, taint, and harm people around you. But always remember that you have the opportunity to be better than the people that hurt you.
Happy one. My parents combined their last names without a hyphen, so we have a unique name. It took me a while to realize other people existed with my friends' same first and last names. It really weirded me out. Mildly happy one. I was raised not to argue with my siblings, and it was forbidden not to get along, so we got along. Not as happy. I thought everyone's parents would just take random bins of their precious things, including clothes, pajamas, toys, books, etc., and put them in the basement and never give them back, even when they said they would. Very unhappy. I thought everyone's parents would scream at them if they ever asked why they were doing something or ever said anything the parent didn't 100% agree with. Maybe everyone does do this, though.
Well, that certainly went from happy to sad to me lamenting that some people just should not be parents. Obviously, this person's parental figure lacked any and all emotional maturity where they couldn't even handle their child disagreeing with them.
I grew up in a Christian subculture known as Mennonite. A lot of the ways I was raised would be considered bizarre. No TV, no internet until I was in 6th grade at least. No going to the movies, bowling alleys, or skating rinks. I wasn't allowed to wear shorts. And no other worldly styles such as Christian rock, rap, etc. My mom wears long skirts and a covering on her head and is often mistaken for either a Catholic nun or Amish. We had a whole laundry list of do's and don'ts. At the time, it didn't seem bizarre because that's all I knew. Of course, I knew others were different, but that was of little consequence to me. That said, I value my upbringing. I was raised with a strong work ethic and a fantastic moral foundation, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I like that this guy takes the bad with the good. He doesn't directly deride the Mennonite thing or even say that he doesn't live by it anymore. It's kind of up in the air. He doesn't say. But I think that this kind of calls back to the guy who doesn't brush his teeth, but yet his parents still taught him maths and English and stuff where they're clearly engaged with him on a level where it's like, yeah, those parents are good people, and yet they have a blind spot. They just didn't care about oral hygiene. But it doesn't mean they don't love them or anything like that. I mean, kids, here's the thing. You're never going to have all the answers in the future. There's always going to be a blind spot or you're going to mess up or something, and that's the way parents are. It's just a fact. My mom raised me on her own. I remember realizing that, wow, my mom doesn't actually know what she's doing. She's just doing her best. And I've turned out okay.
When my little brothers were babies and they needed to poop, my mother would pick them up, plop them on her lap, and hold them over the trash can in the kitchen. So she'd just be sitting on a chair with the trash can in front of her, letting their turds plop out their butts in full view of us. It's a lot easier than cleaning a dirty diaper later. The weird part is doing this even when I had friends over. They don't come over anymore.
Maybe it's because you sound like a little gremlin, man. No, kind of gross, but I understand the logic. I just, learned to wrap a nappy, though. There's a road tunnel about 20 minutes from where we grew up. It's about 2,000 yards long, and when we drove through it, we all had to hold our breath. No other tunnels, just that one. I thought everyone did it and was surprised when I found out they didn't. Also, if you bring someone a present from your holiday, it's referred to as a rabbit. Again, I was surprised that it's just our family that does that. This isn't a family thing, but when I was a kid, I used to hold my breath whenever I saw like a character in a cartoon or a video game underwater and try to hold it for as long as they're underwater, because my logic was if I can hold my breath for as long as they can underwater when I'm in this situation, I'll be fine because I've been practicing. No, it doesn't work like that. It really doesn't work like that. I remember doing it while watching the Tarzan cartoon. I think it was the episode where Clayton's sister comes and wants revenge for her dead brother.
What's your horror story with bad parenting from strangers? I'll start. I'm in line at the DMV today, and I see a mom who looks, honestly, maybe 35 years old, tops. She has what can only be a 14-year-old daughter with a skin-tight t-shirt with what little cleavage she has on display, along with shorts cut so short that her butt is hanging out. This girl's on her cell phone just yelling up a storm at whoever she's talking to. It's straight out of Maury Povich, because the best part is her mom is dressed exactly the same. Her 3-year-old son is running around screaming at the top of his lungs, bumping into people, and at one point I turn my back and he runs up and hits me on the back of the leg. I had the audacity to ask the mother to watch her kid, and I get a huge mind your own business rant. She then proceeds to place him in a stroller, give him a Pepsi and some flaming hot Cheetos. Where on earth have all the parents gone? Why is it more important to be friends with your kid? What would you have done? As a side note, when she yelled at me to mind my own business, I said, fair enough. Her reply, yeah, that's right. I honestly just laughed out loud. What else can you do in that situation? If she's not going to parent the kids, it's not like you can. I used to work at a sandwich shop, and there was a man in line with his son. The little boy was a bit bouncy and kept tugging on the man's arm, saying, "Daddy, I need to potty real bad." And the dad would say, "In a minute, son." This went on for like 5 minutes, and the little boy says, "Daddy, I have to potty now." And the man all of a sudden turns to the son and backhands him across the face and yells at him, "I told you to wait a minute." And the boy bursts into tears. My manager was right there, and she was in a fury. She started yelling at the guy that he was a jerk and a horrible person and told him to get the heck out of her store and never come back. The guy was like, "Mind your own business. This is my kid and I can do what I want." And she said, "Leave now before I call the police." So the man hitched the boy up by his arm and practically dragged him out of the store. The worst part, they were less than 10 feet from the bathroom the entire time. That poor kid. I hope that kid ended up peeing all over the inside of Dad's car, because you know what? He deserves it. I used to babysit for a very dysfunctional family. The mom got knocked up on purpose so the dad wouldn't leave her. Subsequently, the dad hated the mom and resented the child. I know this because they fought about it often, publicly, and in front of the child. When I would arrive, the baby would always have a very dirty diaper that had obviously been like that for many, many hours. The baby's first word was her own name and then my name. Not mama or dada, her own 3 fricking syllable name. One day, the child had no milk or baby food left, and the mom goes to the store and comes back with just a pack of cigarettes. I asked her why she didn't get anything for the baby, and she said, "Well, I didn't have enough for both, and I don't get paid till Friday." It was Wednesday, and she was just gonna let the kid go hungry for 3 days. There was nothing edible in the house. I absolutely lost it. I don't think I've ever raged out on someone so bad in my entire life. I let her have it for a good 10 minutes, screaming at the top of my lungs the litany of reasons why she was a failure as a parent, and how I was gonna call CPS if things didn't change. Anyways, she burst into tears and took the cigarettes back and came home with milk. So I guess it kinda worked. I ended up making pureed veggies at home and bringing them to the little girl for the rest of the week. They moved away shortly after that, and I always wondered what happened to the little girl. Let's just hope that your reality check to her had a long-term impact. I teach first graders, and I'm convinced most parents should not be raising children. Here's my most recent story. One day, I start afternoon class and I ask my students how they're doing. One girl says bad, and I ask her why. She says that she's hungry because she didn't eat lunch. I ask her why she hasn't had lunch yet, and she says it's because her mom was playing on the computer and she forgot to feed them, and then didn't have time. How the heck do you forget to feed a 7-year-old? Later, I brought her a snack when I had a minute because there's no way I could let a kid go without food. Unfortunately, it's always the kid that suffers in these situations. I recently had an encounter from the other end of the spectrum. I was cycling through the downtown area when I passed this Chinese lady who let her tiny kid, I'm guessing around 3 or 4 years old, walk on the street side of her. And just as I passed, this kid is making some excited gestures at his mom, happily gibbering about something while simultaneously pretty much running backwards right into the side of me, while I'm cycling at full speed. He goes flying backwards. I'm pretty sure I hit him right in the face with my knee. I stop, horrified to check if the kid is okay. He's making this face like he's inhaling a huge breath of air to start bawling. But before I can get off the cycle or he can start screaming, his mom looks back, sees what's going on, and just snips a few words of Chinese at him. The kid just looks at her and instantly regains his composure, with obvious effort. I'm pretty sure he's hurt, but he quietly just runs right back up to her. The lady just smiles and waves at me and walks off at a brisk pace with her kid, and I'm just left standing there looking completely stumped at the bystanders who seem just as confused. That kid is going to grow up tough, even if it kills him. I'm pretty sure his mom's going to make sure of that. At the end of the day, kids will be kids and accidents happen. Things like this sometimes can't be avoided. Mom was probably of the mind that if she just doesn't acknowledge it as a bad thing, the kid won't either and they can just move on. If he was really hurt, he would've let you guys know. I used to work at a crappy gas station / convenience store. One day, a woman comes up to the counter with her daughter. She places on the counter hot dogs, hot dog buns, Kraft mac and cheese, and a 6-pack of Corona. She then asks me for a pack of cigarettes. After ringing up all the items, she swipes her debit card and it doesn't go through. She tries several times. After about the 4th time, she turns to this little girl who couldn't be older than 6. And I kid you not, she says, "Looks like you won't be eating tonight," and walks away, leaving her little girl at the counter tearing up. I was dumbfounded, and before I could say anything, the little girl yells to me, "You're a big meanie," and ran out of the door crying. Worst Thanksgiving ever. I mean, she could have tried putting some stuff back to see if it would go through at that point. Maybe the beer and cigarettes. You know, just priorities. While queuing in a coffee shop in England, 2 police officers walked in the door and went straight up to the agitated-looking woman in front of me. They started questioning her about her son, asking when she had last seen him, how old he was, what he was wearing, things like that. So it was fairly evident from the conversation that she had quite recently lost her 6-year-old kid. Both officers kept confusedly looking around the shop until the woman felt obliged to explain why she was in there, saying, "I'm gonna look for him. I'm getting me and my husband a coffee first. Go on ahead, we'll catch up." After picking up my order, I turned around to see them both sitting at a table drinking their coffees like not even a single care was given. As I walked out the door, I saw the woman peer out the front window, looking for her son, I suppose. Yeah, she doesn't seem to have as much urgency as you would think, does she? I was at the store with my dad, and we see this woman take her baby's bottle and pour Mountain Dew into it before giving it back to the kid. This is a baby, no more than a year old. My dad goes up to the lady and asks if she really just gave Mountain Dew to the kid, and she replies, "Yeah, he likes it, so I give it to him. I always give him what he wants." I fear for that generation. I was at the mall once and there was a young family in front of me. The little brat in the high chair didn't like the cheeseburger from McDonald's they got him. So he wailed and screamed and then picked up the cheeseburger and threw it at the dad, painting his shirt with ketchup and mustard. The dad then went up and got the kid another meal. I remember thinking, if I did that to my dad, I wouldn't have made it out of the mall alive. Look, sometimes you gotta discipline your kid. I get it, they're your kid, but you can't let them get away with stuff like this. You're not doing them any favors. I saw a kid, probably 5 or 6, walking with his dad to soccer practice. They walk to one pitch and there's no one there, and the kid says, "Oh, sorry, we're over there," pointing to another field, maybe 150 yards away. The dad slaps the kid on the back of the head and calls him stupid and other names. Some kids have no chance. Like, come on, that's such a small mistake and you're gonna go ahead and smack the kid for it? Who's being the child in that situation? I went to a barbecue thrown by a friend of a friend. There was a woman who showed up with their ex-husband and his new girlfriend. All 3 were drunk and a bit too friendly with each other, while alternating name-calling. With them was a 2 or 3-year-old little girl, cute as can be with a real light about her. I vaguely remember them telling very inappropriate stories. When the little girl says she's hungry, the father goes and gets the bag of McDonald's he'd been grazing out of and pulls out a near-full container of fries. He proceeds to grab a few and then throw them on the lawn. The girl, without missing a beat, runs around picking them up off the lawn and eats them. He repeats this over and over in front of all the other adults, who didn't seem to take issue. It was like a game to him that he was clearly enjoying. Mom even smiled at it. My wife and I promptly left the party. This guy's treating his daughter like an animal. Someone needs to call CPS. I was lining up at the register at some store, and there was a girl around 10ish and her mom in front of me. And the little girl asked her mom if she can get the Harry Potter books because they're on sale. And the mom replies,
"Why do you need the stupid books for? We got a big television you can watch the movies on."
God forbid some kids want to read nowadays. I worked at the YMCA in Houston, and we did programs that reached lower-income neighborhoods, the kind full of crime and poverty. One day we were letting the kids go, and we watched the rides leave as a security issue. One of the kids had made a drawing earlier that he was particularly proud of, and showed it to his dad, gleaming. The dad immediately snatched it out of the boy's hand, ripped up the drawing, and smacked the kid, in full view of us employees. He went on about how he shouldn't be doing homosexual stuff like drawing, and smacked him a couple more times. Needless to say, we called the authorities and he was arrested for child abuse, or something similar. How does this man think he's gonna get away with something like that in full view of everyone who's very much interested in this kid's well-being? I've been a nanny for a little over 5 years, so I've seen my fair share of crazy families. But there's one babysitting job that sticks out more than any other. The ex's mom referred me to her hairdresser, so when she called me, I was pretty excited to go to her house. I was watching a 4-year-old boy that everyone raved about being so adorable and fun. He sure was cute, but fun is not the word I would use to describe that night. She left telling me she would be home anywhere between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Came home at 4 a.m. and got mad at me for falling asleep on the couch. The kid had the worst ADHD I've ever experienced before, and there was absolutely no food or drink in the fridge, other than margarita mix and a 2-week-old half-gallon of milk, which he said he drank earlier that day. All of the sippy cups that they owned smelled like rotten eggs. I felt so bad for this boy. I looked through every drawer to see if I could find anything to give him, and all I managed to find was workout supplements, steroids, needles, and lots of different pills like phentermine and ephedrine. I bought him some dinner, got them a fresh gallon of milk, and never came back to that house again. Another case of the parents are crappy people and the kid suffers. We went to a soft play center with my niece the other day. One boy managed to find this big red ball and jam it at the bottom of the slide. His little brother then proceeded to go down the slide and get stuck. Chaos ensued for a while as they tried to get the boy out. The parents were going on and on at the staff. Eventually, they swindled a free drink out of the place. Then they gave their daughter a lollipop, no food is allowed in the actual play area, and she ran around the play area and climbed the stairs to come down the slide. We were watching all of this whilst keeping an eye on my niece, basically getting her to stay out of the way. The parents made barely any effort to get the lolly off her. She then went into this little viewing thing made of perspex with the lolly in her mouth and was dribbling. Her drool then proceeded to drip down to where we were sitting. We promptly left after being completely grossed out. This is by far the nastiest family I've ever come across, and a very good argument for contraception. Yeah, some parents are a walking billboard for reasons to not have kids. In high school, I made friends with this really shy guy who stuttered and was generally socially awkward, but really nice. He was also a genius pianist. He was taking 2 years for one at his piano courses. He was composing amazing pieces at the age of 16, and I truly admired his ability. His parents, however, didn't see it that way. They were both engineers, and they considered his love for music despicable, worthless, and a bad habit that needs to be uprooted. When he was practicing at home, they tossed old shoes at him, and they made him sleep on the floor if he played for more than 2 hours. Once a professor from the musical academy called them to tell them that they have an amazing son and that he could be famous one day. They hung up the phone. When high school was over, he really wanted to apply to the musical academy, but they didn't let him. They said that the only courses they would ever fund were the ones in math and geography, the qualifying subjects for the economy university. So he had to go there for his higher education. I haven't seen him in a good while, but I heard he went abroad. I hope he escaped those jerks for good. It really sucks to see kids who have an amazing amount of talent and parents that just don't support them the way they need to. My mom is a teacher at a primary school in England in a really bad part of town. The stories she brings home are appalling, from kids who have never been read to or even talked to much who come to school age 5 without being able to speak in proper sentences. Also, the saddest things often involve parenting from the previous generation. The standout event being a mother who came into my mother, the music teacher, and SBS, that she doesn't know any nursery rhymes to sing to her children, which was one of the set tasks for bonding type homework. She spent an hour with that woman teaching her Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I was at a mall playground with the wife and 2 kids. My son was 3 years old and was running around with about 20 other kids, most of them his age. Keep in mind that kids can't be taller than 3 feet to play in this little playground. There was this one fat woman and she was watching about 4 kids, and all of them were taller than 4 feet and they were playing rough, pushing each other around and whatnot. My son goes around the area that they were playing at and starts playing by himself, and one of the kids tries to kick my son. My wife, who's 5'2" and 100 pounds, calmly walks that way with my 3-month-old daughter and tells the woman, who's like 5'6" and about 250 pounds, to watch her kids because they were playing a little rough. She said, "Okay, whatever." My wife stays there and watches just in case something happens. The older kid goes running towards my son and pushes him. My wife tells the kid, who's about 9, not to push my son. The woman flips the heck out and starts screaming, "Don't scream at my baby," and blah blah blah. My wife tells her that she should pay more attention to her kids and how they're too old to be playing around smaller kids. She tells my wife to shut up and not to tell her how to raise her kids. My wife starts walking away and the woman starts getting louder. So from my seat 15 feet away, I yell at her, "You do not talk to my wife that way. Your kids are misbehaving and you're doing nothing about it. Learn how to be a good parent." She shuts up and looked at me in disbelief. She didn't know I was with my wife, or that I would talk to her like that in front of so many people. She then started to talk crap again, and we ignored her. After 5 minutes of her ridiculousness, my wife got the security guard and she got her butt kicked out of the place. 15 minutes after, she passes doing threatening signs at my wife, but when I looked at her, she stopped and looked away. I was seriously raging and about to beat her, but I did my best to calm down and be a responsible adult. I totally get it, my friend. Interactions like that get your blood boiling, especially if someone's gonna go threatening me and mine. "If you don't wear these pink shoes I'm buying you, I'm gonna cut all your rabbits' heads off." Sadly, that was actually my dad talking to a 10-year-old me in a thrift store. He then proceeded to get into an argument with a woman who said, "You're the most horrible person I've ever heard in my life," and called her a man-hater and a lesbian before we finally left. Compared to some of the other stuff, that's relatively mild. Yeah, my childhood sucked. I was at a movie theater and we had just walked in and sat down in our seats since the theater we were going to was open. An employee, probably around 35 years old, walks in and asks everyone, a small handful of people, to leave for just a few minutes so we can clean it. He had a stutter and some type of mild disability. The employee was super friendly and nice about having to ask us all to leave. This dad with a beer belly and cut off sleeves who was there with his 3 preteen and teen kids started making fun of the employee and the way he spoke, joking, mimicking, and trying to get his kids to join in with him. I chewed that jerk out. How are you gonna set an example like that for your kids? This guy's being super friendly, working hard, and you're gonna give him a hard time because of the way he speaks, which he can't control, by the way. Some people really shouldn't breed. I worked as a waitress for about 4 years. One family was very rude and demanding every time they ate there. Their children, ranging from 5 to 10 years old, would snap at me or shake their cups to get my attention. When we didn't come right away, the children would literally start screaming, while the parents laughed. Another family had a 12-year-old daughter that would take all the sugar packets from the table and play with them. Much of the sugar ended up on the floor or on the table. Once I figured out what she was doing, I would go take away the basket before they sat down. Lastly, I only saw this family in there once, but it was a tatted up gangster couple. The mom was no older than 23, and they had 4 kids. Let them run around the restaurant untamed and basically ignored them the entire time. They made a mess of the tables and didn't even tip. Oh, and they also tried stealing quarters off this cancer research donation thing we had. I work customer service at Loblaws part-time while I go to school. Lucky me. I've grown resentful of people. One day, I encountered a lady who was absolutely flabbergasted that her milk, on which the expiry date was clearly written, had gone bad. She was going on and on complaining. Had the store manager called down, the front end manager, and the dairy manager too. Once this whole ordeal was handled, she turns to her 14-year-old daughter and says, "Now that's how it's done." As someone who worked in customer service and retail for a good portion of their life, I hate people like this. Don't be teaching your kids to be the same jerk you are. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think it should be mandatory that every person is to work at least 2 years in customer service, just to learn to be a little humble.
Parents of uncool children, when did you realize your child wasn't one of the popular kids? My oldest son has always been quiet and a bit of an introvert. He's tall for his age, lanky, wears glasses, plays trombone in the school band, and is a complete computer geek. There were never any delusions that he was going to be one of the popular kids. That said, he is popular amongst his fellow nerdlings. My youngest son has always been pretty popular, especially among the girls. We have had little girls calling the house, giggling and asking to speak to him since he was in 4th grade. He's in middle school now, and I fear what it will be like when he gets into high school. My son got locked in his tuba case by the other band kids. He's not even cool among the not cool kids. I know my daughter is uncool. Why? I have no idea. She's a great kid, very outgoing and funny in that 3rd grade kind of way. She gets picked on a bit for the things she likes. Hello Kitty, Barbie, MLP, etc. As a kid, I was super unpopular too, and I tell her all the time not to worry about it. She'll find that group of friends who love her to death and want to play with her. She came home very excited last month because a new girl in school had the same Hello Kitty backpack. They made fast friends, and I hope they stay friends. A single dad is pretty cute and uber dorky like me. This topic could turn dark at any moment, so enjoy the wholesomeness while you can, viewers. My daughter has always been quick to make friends. She always has someone to play with at the park. Kids follow her around like she's their leader, and she has a blast. In school, though, she's not popular. She's the oldest in her class because her birthday is so late in the year, so she's taller than everyone, started losing her teeth before the others, and more mature than some of them. The other kids pick on her, call her names, hide her things, make fun of her bunny teeth, adult teeth that are still at that cute but a little too big for your face stage, and give her a hard time. I don't understand it. She's so popular at playgrounds and parks, but she's an outcast at school. Ah, the days of adolescent playground bullying. Been there, sister, been there. My oldest is a crybaby. I love him a bit, but he's a whiner of the highest order. I guess I realized it about when he left kindergarten. He's in 5th grade now, and he still curls up in a ball with real tears whenever he thinks he might be in trouble, even if he isn't, which he almost always isn't. I love him, but it's sad. When they reminded me of myself, my middle child loves video games and is amazing in academics and has mild autistic tendencies. My eldest loves bugs and animals and gets distracted easily. Neither one of them is prom king or queen material. The youngest is a born cheerleader. Why do I have all of those not good tendencies? I also love bugs. I also like video games, but I'm not good at academics. When he cried all the time in 1st through 3rd grade, then in 5th grade he insisted he was going to be a dragon hunter. That continued for a few years. He actually researched getting grants so he could travel to Europe to dig up dragon bones and prove they existed. Then he got into drawing swords and writing stories involving the swords. It's all good. I accepted him as he is and got him playing Magic and D&D. Now he watches anime all the time and is working with people to develop and write an online RPG and site while doing online schooling and working 2 part-time jobs. I figured he'd never give me a grandchild, but she's due in July. The best thing a child can do is surprise and make proud a good parent who's always supported them. I don't know if she's uncool yet because she's too little, but I witnessed a situation that brought up a lot of feelings. My 4-year-old daughter went to a birthday party of some little girl from her kindergarten. They had these mini blow-up jumping castles. I noticed 2 little girls standing at the entrance of one that blocked it when my daughter tried to get in and made up some rule about why she couldn't. I did laugh my butt off when my daughter immediately thought, screw it, and just ran around and back to the other entrance, but the girls got up and went to the other one when my daughter hopped in, leaving her in there alone. I got really depressed just watching her play by herself and the other girls being mean. Part of me wanted to deflate the other castle, sealing the little girls in a rubbery tomb. The other wanted to run over and just hug my daughter and never let go. Needless to say, I bought her a lot of lollies and played with her like crazy after the party. But then, a few days later when I dropped her off at kindergarten, some of the girls called out to her and ran over and started playing. I can't figure out toddler social dynamics. There is a 10-year difference between me and my youngest brother, and I first noticed that he was just not a cool person when I picked him up from school and found out that he has a tendency to hiss like a cat at people when they said something he didn't like. God, I love the little weirdo. I'm an older sister by 8 years, and I noticed my middle school sister wasn't popular simply on the basis she got bullied so much that she had to hide in the library during lunch, and she takes an odd route home to avoid the kids who actually corner her on the way home. She's the extremely shy type, and the butthole kids don't really help that. They stole her lunch and spit in it once apparently, and she came home depressed one day because of it. Sometime around middle school, it became apparent that regardless of who she tried to be friends with or how much effort she put into being social, she was always the odd one out, always the friend and never the best friend. No one calls her to hang out or go anywhere. She doesn't date. I still haven't figured out why, unless it is basic, not wanting to be seen with someone who might be a lesbian. This is the southern US after all. It's killing her. It's killing me to see how isolated and left out she is. She's nearly done with high school, and I can only hope that college will be better. For now, she has an online group she considers friends. There's that, at least. You know, I can't deny that when I was young, it took me a lot of time to learn how to socialize a lot better with people in person, but until that point, I had a lot of online friends and interactions that really did help keep me going. It does make me sad to think that without the interconnectivity of the internet, some people would just be completely alone, and that thought honestly breaks my heart, and it's why I try to be as nice as possible to people where and when I can. My son, who is almost 15, has several learning disabilities, ADD, dyspraxia, and mild Asperger's. He finds it very difficult to make friends and keep them. He also struggles with low self-esteem. I've tried to get him into all sorts of different hobbies, but he's not interested. The only thing he loves is video games, to the point that he could easily play them for 15 hours a day. He also has a very offbeat humor, which most people don't get. I love him to bits because he's my son and his heart is in the right place, but I do worry about how he's going to get through life and form healthy friendships and relationships. Man, parents have so much to worry about when they have kids and stuff, and it totally makes sense. But like, even when I was a kid in high school, I was going through a point where I thought, man, I'm never gonna make friends. But I was lucky enough to meet people that appreciated and loved me and just generally helped me become the person I am today. And hell, I ain't no success story, but I certainly like who I am, at least on the best of days. But that's one of the hardest things in life, growing up and learning to love yourself. I had 6 children, 5 girls and a boy. Some were popular and some weren't. My unpopular, kind of reserved and socially awkward during primary school son is in med school and will be a doctor next year. I don't think popularity is necessarily a good criteria for judging how your child is doing. In some classes, the kind of behavior that allows you to fit into a class and be popular are not all that positive, such as bullying more vulnerable children. I think the most important thing is for children to be true to themselves and who they are, and not compromise that to fit in. Hopefully they will find friends who are like them. I thought it was interesting that the creators of South Park were nerdy kids who didn't fit in. Sometimes the most successful school children are not all that successful when it comes to real life, and the children who are strong enough to be themselves can be quite successful. That is certainly true in some cases, but sometimes not. This isn't really what this is about, but I'm glad that they brought it up. My youngest son is a future neckbeard. He's a great kid and very active in Boy Scouts. He's 14 and only needs a few things to get his eagle. He can easily achieve it before 16. He's good in math and science and very well spoken when something interests him. He can explain plants and trees and geology of an area to younger Scouts on a level far above the average 14-year-old. But outside of Scouts, he is very socially awkward. He has a hard time making friends. Unless they are Scouts or gamers, he's overweight but not morbidly obese, and I guess average looks. I wish more of my wife's genes had kicked in. At home, it's all Xbox and computers. He has no interest in the outside world. If I ask, hey, let's go walk the dog down by the river, I just get, no, I don't feel like it. If I'm working in the yard on a hot day and my wife says, why don't you go and see if your dad could use some help? His reply is usually, if he needs me, he'll come get me. He's had his few middle school girlfriends that we all know are counted in weeks, but when they break up, he's devastated and becomes recluse for a while. His room is generally clean, but it smells of feet and butt. He won't shower or change clothes unless we tell him to. We actually held off to see how long he would do it. He wore the same t-shirt for 5 days over summer break. I didn't ask about underwear and socks. We just explained it and told him to go shower and change. A lot of these stories are really old and I'm just sat here like, man, I want to know how these people turned out. Like, did they surprise them? Yes? No? I hope so. I realized when we moved to a community with its own playground. My daughter is 5. She's so loving and sweet and very intelligent, but she's not good at making friends. She has no problem asking anyone to play, but most of the kids immediately shut her down and walk away. I have no clue why. Sometimes they'll give her some bullcrap line about her having to stay in the ice castle, which is one corner of the playground. She asks if she can come out, but they tell her no, and then they go off by themselves. So she sits there, dejected and defeated. She's such a genuinely good child and a good person, and I don't know why the other kids treat her like they do. I remember the same thing happening to me when I was her age. Kids can be so cruel. I knew before kindergarten that our son was not cool. He's an artsy, strange, nerdy kid that is bad at sports. He couldn't catch a ball when all the other boys could. He's also brilliant, has near perfect pitch, can tell a joke better than anyone his age, and is particularly empathetic. He always consoles whoever is having a bad day. One of the aspects that clued me into his wonderful nerdiness is that he'd construct a pretend world with all sorts of characters and scenarios, and could not understand why the other kids, excepting a few like-minded lovable oddballs, did not want to participate. He's picked on. It is amazing how cruel 5-year-old children can be. He's the target of the alpha male types. Until 2nd grade, he did not realize that he was uncool, but then it hit him. He's now 10 and in 4th grade. His teachers tell us that he is well liked, but he does not have any friends, which my wife sees as a problem, but I don't. He asked me once when he was 7 why other kids didn't like him. I pointed out that a lot of people like him, just that the cool kids didn't want to include him in their clique, and that's okay. I let him know that neither his mother or I were ever cool, and we've done okay for ourselves in this world. Aside from being a total geek for old school Mega Man, my 11-year-old is crazy proper and very white in an almost all-black school. He gets called Whitey constantly, and kids from the bus have beat the crap out of him and his little brother on more than a few occasions. He will now choke anyone that puts him on the defensive, which comes off a little bit like a serial killer in training, but to the proper thing, I once got a call from the principal because my son had set up a meeting with him, stating that he needed to switch schools because these kids all will have behavioral issues, and I can't get an education in this environment. No snark or anything like that. He was completely on point and very upset that the teacher didn't have her classroom under control. There was an HR director hiding in my kid's body. A little off, but damn, do I like my boy. I am a much older sister, which is sort of similar in a lot of ways. I realized my brother wasn't one of the popular kids when I went to visit his school to show off the high school band program. The cute-looking, well-spoken kids tend to sit together, and so do the less cute, dorky kids. I always sort of guessed, though, because he'd always been that weird gamer kid with beta tendencies and hardly ever got invited to birthday parties. It was just confirmed when I went to visit him. Damn, girl, slapping your brother with the beta tendencies. Cruel, cruel woman, even if it is true. My son is 10. I think I realized he's not part of the popular crowd last year. He had a sort of falling out with his best and only friend. After they stopped hanging out, I'd ask him who he played with at recess or who he sat with at lunch. And he'd tell me he played alone and sat at the end of the lunch table alone by the trash can. It broke my heart. He's such a sweet kid. Pretty sensitive, quiet, but not super shy. More of an observer. He's not the first to jump into an activity, but give him time and he'll participate. His interests have always been different than those of the popular crowd. We tried various sports, a season of soccer and a basketball camp, only to come out of those with a lesson on teamwork and how it's not fair to the rest of the team to quit halfway through the season. He's had ambitions to be a paleontologist since second grade. He can remember facts about dinosaurs that he's read 2 years ago. He's incredibly intelligent. He's also a huge Star Wars fan. His favorite is The Empire Strikes Back. We put him in Cub Scouts so he can socialize with kids who aren't into sports, but by the time he joined, most of the boys in the troop already knew each other. I try to dress him in what the kids are wearing, Hollisters, Aero, etc. He has no preference for what he wears, and if I can take away one thing that kids always single other kids out for, then I'll do it. Overall, I think he'll be okay. He's got 2 to 3 friends with similar interests. He's a smart kid. If he can get through middle school and high school, I think he'll do just fine. I wonder if he's studying dinosaur bones as we speak. My parents moved and my little sister had to start high school in a new town, and I was worried she wouldn't make many friends. I was excited when she joined a small group and started hanging out with them until she wore a fake tail to school one day. Oh dear. Spits out cereal in the morning. Oh my god, my sister's a furry! My high school-age daughter wanted to drive into the city to watch a Wes Anderson film and eat at her favorite vegetarian Indian place for her birthday. We live in the rural South. You ignorant fool. What was cool 10 years ago and what was cool now have completely switched. Your daughter wasn't unpopular, she was a damn trendsetter. At my daughter's first parent-teacher conference in first grade, I asked the teacher how my daughter was doing socially. I had noticed that there was a little talk from her about friends, unlike kindergarten, and the teacher paused uncomfortably and said something about my daughter being very bright, and sometimes bright kids don't have patience for things they find silly, which sets them apart a little, but that I shouldn't worry. My daughter will graduate high school this year, and she only has a couple of close friends, one of which she's had since third grade, and even those she doesn't really see or hang out with often. My son took longer to be obvious to me because his elementary school teacher flat lied to me and told me that he was socially doing just fine and had quite a few friends. My son does normally have a small circle of friends that he's comfortable with, but he's never been and will never be one of the popular kids. Neither one of my kids are bullied. My daughter was in elementary school, but not since, and I attribute a lot of that to the way our school handles the bright kids. Starting in 7th grade, the high achievers and gifted kids, my daughter is a high achiever, my son gifted, are separated out into Honors Academy. For 7th and 8th grade, they only have classes with each other, and they do a lot of forced group work and social interaction in addition to the regular curriculum. Because they're so separate from the rest of the school, there's a little chance for them to be targeted, and they form friendships with their fellow weirdos. I had a lot of doubts when they first introduced this program. My daughter's 7th grade class was the inaugural year, but it definitely seems to have resulted in happier kids. Neither of my kids have a ton of friends or in the neighborhood of popular, but they have a niche at school and feel safe and able to be themselves, which is great. Of course, their district also instituted a character program about 5 years ago, which also seems to have had some impact on how the kids interact. perfect. With all the talk of the gifted kids curriculum, I'm thinking about Malcolm in the Middle a little bit. God, that and My Name is Earl are absolute TV gold. If you haven't seen them, definitely check them out. I've known since I met him for the first time. He's my stepson, so we first met when he was 5, and he was just the biggest little whiny brat you could ever meet. He's now almost 9 and still a bit of a little crybaby, but less so. He's had no friends at school because he's an obsessive Star Wars geek. Husband and I take blame for this. We're both huge fans, but he was named to surpass us and hit the freaky stage. It is all he talks about, and it tends to alienate the other kids. But I think what truly does it is when he acts like a Lego person. All day, every day, as long as we're not running errands, he walks like they do on Lego cartoons and holds his hands in a C shape to mimic their hands. Talks like Yoda fairly often as well. He's the kid having a great time by himself, playing all the different roles in his game. I think all this makes me love him more. He's a little awkward genius, and I wouldn't want him any other way. Oh, and I don't worry about him picking up chicks later in life because he already has a girlfriend. He tells me he hasn't gotten a new one because the girls in his new class just aren't pretty to him. Apparently, he's got some high standards. I can't deny it. I'm picturing it. I'm picturing that little boy doing his Yoda voice and doing the Lego walk, and I'm just thinking,
Trouble in Lego City there is.
I secretly hope my daughter doesn't turn out cool. I want her to have some good, trustworthy, and responsible friends, and I want her to be a kid who likes to read, do art, exercise, and chill with dad playing video games. I have a vague idea why people do it, but there's a specific reason I read that one. So basically, the whole thing where it's like, because you're a cool kid immediately means you're kind of a piece of crap. That is not the case. People are not arbitrary two-dimensional things. You can be cool and be nice. You can be uncool and a total douchebag. Hell, I'm pretty sure most of the time there are like several opinions on who is actually the cool kids at school. Because schools are big, especially high schools. I remember turning around to my friend and being like, wait, you think they're the cool kids? I thought they were the cool kids. But I meant it more in like, no, they're cool. They are actually cool and nice and everyone likes them. But I concur, being a dad and having your child play video games with you, it's a nice thought. My daughter was in developmentally delayed classes for 2 years of pre-K, then had a special helper for kindergarten with speech every day. We moved, and in first grade she was different and could not make friends. She was received from speech, and remedial reading put her on Adderall for ADHD without hyperactivity, and she makes A's and B's but still different. Her storytelling was a little weird. I've always been well-liked but an introvert. She's an extrovert and was not well-liked. I started giving her social tips. Ask what they want to do. Let them do the talking. Ask about what they like. People like to talk about themselves. Now she has a ton of friends. So weird that it worked. I think I've always known but never cared. Popularity means nothing later in life. My only concern is that they find a few friends to hang out with at school. Man's got his priorities straight. It's not about gaining popularity or anything like that. It's having friends, true friends, and, kindling joy and all that stuff. Best thing you can do for your kids at the end of the day is make sure they're happy, safe, and you love them. I mean, damn, with all the anxieties that parents must have with raising kids, it's no wonder that you screw up in a couple of places. But, like I said, just gotta make sure that you're doing your best. What was something you saw you were definitely not supposed to see? My severance check. Apparently someone at the payroll company addressed it to me instead of HR, opened it at my desk, and laughed. Packed up my crap and left. I found a letter between my parents back when my dad was in the army 10 years before I was born, when cleaning out the house. He was saying how they should get a divorce because it just wasn't seeming to work out. When I was 16, they did end up getting a divorce, and I have never spoken to them about it. Leaving work late one evening, I saw the HR director and CFO in a dark office shredding papers. No, that's not a euphemism. I didn't say anything, but quietly walked on down the hall. 2 weeks later, we were raided by the SEC and several people were charged with cooking the books. Sounds like some Wolf of Wall Street stuff going on there. Back in 1997, I started work at a new job and took over the office of a salesman who had recently been fired. I was in IT using the same computer that had been set up for sales. My first task was to install all the software I'd need. The computer hard drive was almost full, so I poked around and found a ton of folders filled with smut. Went to my supervisor and he said to delete it, warning me that the salesman had been fired for downloading smut. Over the next few weeks, I kept finding secret smut folders on the company's network. Not only had he downloaded enough smut to max out his computer's HD, he had the network at about 90% capacity. When I was done deleting all of the folders I could find, the server capacity was less than 50%. Dude was seriously addicted to his smut. I wouldn't have just fired him. I would have booked therapy appointments on his behalf. Worked for a downtown metropolitan hotel for a long time, and I've seen a lot of stuff I wasn't supposed to see. Probably the worst was a kid with an old man. Checked this guy in at 1 a.m, not uncommon because people travel at different times, but he was alone. Like an hour later, he asked for something like a towel or blanket. Anyways, we dispatched our runner to deliver it. After the runner comes to me and says he thinks something is wrong because he caught a glimpse of someone and the old guy was trying hard to block the entrance. Being that we were supposed to take stuff like human trafficking seriously, I asked our maintenance guy to cut his power so we could get a call to come up and try to fix the problem. He does, and I go up with him to apologize for the inconvenience because the guy was a member. Sure enough, we hear a kid in the bathroom hiding. Try to ask who the kid was, and the old guy tried everything to shut us down, from throwing his status around to bribing. We called the cops and we let them deal with it. Just 2 days ago at a community pool, a teenage couple who entered into the pool area went into the hot tub, stood up to stretch my legs and looked over to, well, SX in the hot tub. It was midday. I cringed pretty hard, but I laughed even harder when the neighborhood cop showed up. I once arrived early to pick up a girl for a first date. She was renting a small garden apartment behind a bigger house. It was just after dusk and I walked around the corner. The sliding door was standing open, and she was inside walking around, brushing her hair, wearing only her underwear. She did not see me, so I just walked back around that corner and waited another 10 minutes. When I walked around again, she had a dress on. I never told her. The date went well, and I only got to see her underwear again several weeks later. When I was about 16, snooping in my parents' wardrobe, I found a diary written by my mother when she was 14 from the year 1970. Read some beautiful and brilliantly written entries about meeting and dating my dad, who was 16 at the time. Had to read a little between the lines in some slightly later entries as they were written with such flowery language. In one such entry, all of a sudden, she discloses that she's had an abortion, performed by one of my relatives, an anesthesiologist, and she has never told anyone. This is the reason that you don't poke around in people's diaries, because you might find something that you never wanted to know. I was in elementary school playing basketball. I shot the ball, but it ended up going over the fence onto the other side of what was someone's backyard. My teacher requested that after school I knock on the door of the house where the ball had landed to get it back, and so I did. I did not expect a woman wrapped in a towel with one of her nipples revealed to answer the door. I was shocked, but carried on with my mission. For those wondering, she stated she did not have the ball. Back when I was a teenager, we hosted a New Zealander at our house for a couple of weeks. Guy gets to our place after the flight, and about 10 minutes later, I'm walking around my house to see where he's at. The door to his room is partially open, and the dude is laying face down on the bed and humping the ever-loving hell out of a pillow. I backed away slowly, like Homer when he saw a poo cheating on his wife. I felt bad for the pillow. My mom gave me an old laptop of hers when I was about 13, and I was scrolling through random pics she had left on it of my little brother's football game, and then boom, nudes. Years ago, a colleague had an old smartphone that he brought in to give to another coworker as theirs broke. The phone was sitting on the new owner's desk, but she hadn't yet tried it out. As it was still charging after months of not being used, we were talking about how cool it was of the coworker. Smartphones were not widespread yet, and I picked it up to see how it felt in my hand. I pressed a button, and the first thing that I saw was a Google search for lump on anus. I quickly put the phone back down. This must have been the last thing he searched for when he last used it a long time ago, and forgot about it. When I was 11, I walked into my mom's bedroom and saw my mom and her husband doing everyone's favorite number, and we never spoke about it. Years later, when I was 24, she walked into my bedroom and saw my boyfriend naked. We never spoke about that either. All probably for the best. My dad's Alcoholics Anonymous chips. Learned it's why my parents got divorced. Proud of him for being in recovery, though. When I was a young teen, I was once leaving my house to go do something in the neighborhood. As soon as I go out of the door, I heard my parents at the garage. My mother seemed to be in her car, and my father was sitting down behind her car and pleading with her not to leave. My parents were divorcing, and I saw a few scenes that I wish I never had. Not really horrific, but seeing your parents in emotional pain can be rough. No doubt. The code to open all the doors in my primary school at the time. A lot of power to open any locked door for an 8-year-old. I don't know about anyone else, but I remember being a kid and being like, looking at the chain link fence in my primary school and going, I could climb that, I could escape, wanting to escape, thinking about escaping, but then I'd always chicken out and be like, oh god, but what would the consequences be? Am I going to get in trouble with the teachers? What would my mum do to me if I ran away from school for a day? Like, 8 to 10-year-old me, what are they going to do? I'd go straight home. And what would happen then? My mum would probably walk me all the way back to school, and it would just be a massive waste of time. I do conventions and corporate events for a living. Was once called into a room to fix a power cable. It was a meeting of a worldwide, well-known house paint manufacturer. It was a closed-door meeting and I had to be let in to do my job quickly. They didn't stop talking as I did my work. We've pulled all the units from production and recalled all units on the shelves, but the ones still in transit cannot be recalled. They might be caught when they reach the sales floor if the retailers are still watching the recall, but it will have been weeks since we issued it. The guy who then responds to that states that they can prove they did their diligence in court with the recall and any units sold to consumers will be the retailer's fault. I never did get to hear what the recall was for, but they seemed pretty tense about it, legally speaking. So I doubt it was quality control. I felt like I had witnessed the mafia talking about a murder. The owner of the club where my sister worked took an armload of shotguns out of his truck. It was about 3 a.m. and I was parked behind the bar waiting for her. The reason I know he didn't mean anyone to see is because he covered them with a tarp and he gave a good long stare around when he got out. Shady dude. He was up to every kind of no good. I literally scrunched down in my seat. I accidentally found someone's notice of performance improvement plan on our company open access SharePoint site. Went straight to my manager so they could quietly inform the manager of the person and have it removed. The person on the performance plan quickly became a top performer and closed the second biggest deal in the region. Not long after, their manager was replaced. Maybe they were always good. Maybe they saw the improvement report and thought, damn, I need to get my affairs in order. And they did it. In spades. I used to work in the basement of a pretty large hospital doing engineering work. They'll often cart dead bodies out of the hospital through the basement, so it's usually not a big deal. You tend to try and ignore it. One time, as I was finishing up a test in a pretty remote room, I walked out to an entire security detail escorting a body. I just got immediately shoved back into the room, so nothing really exciting happened, but I always wondered who that could have been. My third job I had at 17 was at a pizza place. I had 2 managers, one male, one female, and they were both married to other people. Well, I went to hand in my drawer at the end of the one shift and walked into the office, and there they were just making out with some heavy petting. Their spouses found out. They left their families, and then those 2 managers got married to each other. As far as I know, they're still together. Also, no, I didn't tell their families. I was 17. I didn't even know these people's spouses. Their families found out because they told them themselves because they both wanted divorces from their respective spouses. I tend to have a way of finding things out that I'm not supposed to due to my inquisitive nature, but one that comes to mind was when I left my last job. My general manager wasn't exactly a warm, woolly person and was not pleased that I was leaving. I had to get something out of the manager's office and saw my name in an email on the desk. She had told the other 2 managers to wish me the best of luck in my future career and that I would be missed. I was shocked because she actually took the time to send that out to them. Never heard that from any of them, but seeing it showed that she actually cared. Whenever I meet or hear someone say, I am an inquisitive person, I have an inquisitive nature, I just think, you're bloody nosy, which is hypocritical because I'm nosy too. On my way to work in the morning one day, and I'm on a train leaning up against a glass partition between 2 seats. The lady on the other side was doing the same thing, and as her mobile kept pinging with incoming messages, my attention was drawn to it, and because of the angle, I could see the text exchange. To summarize, she offered services of the scatological nature, and the person on the other end was complimenting her on how her mess didn't stink, and I'm going to leave it at that. Definitely not something I should have seen. What everyone made in my company salary-wise, CEO and all high ranks included. It was a very detailed Excel file meant for the owners of the company. For every tier you went up, that salary pretty much doubled. I was 12. I was trying to make my BMX bike into a long-forked chopper-style bike. There was an old man down the road that welded as a business. I had dropped my bike off for some welding on my forks. Went back several days later to pick up my bike. Walked into his shop just as another man pulled an enormous bag of the devil's lettuce out of a duffel bag. They both stopped and just stood there, staring at me for a moment. I turned around and noped the hell out of there. The men then proceeded to look at each other, say, "Well, that was kinda awkward. See you in a month or something?" I suppose depending on the year and place that this occurred, it would be more or less worrisome if someone saw you do a handoff with a big bag of the devil's lettuce. Back in high school, my friends and I used to skateboard in a church parking lot. One day we're hanging out and this car comes tearing into the parking lot and drives over to a secluded corner. A lady gets out and goes to her trunk and pulls out a gun. We think she's about to delete herself, but then she notices us standing there. She paces back and forth a few times before getting back in the car and leaving. As soon as she left, we went across the street to a convenience store and called the police. I think this might be the first story where someone was like, "I witnessed a crime," and then actually went on to call the police instead of burying it in the back of their mind and, posting it on the internet. It might not be the kind of answer you're looking for. A teenage boy's hands, skin, and muscle essentially degloved. I was visiting my folks when the kids came up to the front door, knocked several times, and then promptly collapsed. He'd been riding a go-kart at full speed when the chain broke, wrapping itself around his wrist. The kid survived, but totally lost his hand, amputated. I was a little kid and I went looking for something in the house. Opened a closet in the basement that I usually never looked into and found a huge stack of Christmas presents. Walked over to them and saw they were all from Santa. What the actual heck? Why would Santa deliver presents 2 weeks early, and why would he leave them in the basement closet? Oh. I used to work on oil rigs, and one stormy night I had to go to the cellar deck, the lowest level of the rig, to do a repair, and I caught the safety officer and the production supervisor opening a separator valve and emptying the contents, oily water, straight into the sea. They obviously chose a wintry, stormy night to do this so that by morning the oil would be elsewhere. My wife and I vacationed to London a couple of years ago. After dinner, we decided to go out to try some of the local pubs because, London. We didn't want to go to the tourist trap places, so we followed around some locals. It was about 11 p.m. when we got to the last pub. It was a nice-looking place with a younger crowd. I really had to pee, but I couldn't find a restroom anywhere. I walked up to the guy working the front door and asked him where the restroom was. He looked at me kind of funny and said, "Upstairs, first door on your left." I thanked him and scurried back into the bar. The staircase was in the back left corner, blocked by a table. I found it odd. I had to ask the group sitting at the table to move to let me slide by. They thought it was strange too by the looks on their faces. You could tell that these stairs weren't meant to be used, but I had been drinking and my bladder was about to bust. As I reached the next floor, there's a long hallway with about 5 doors. The bouncer had told me it was the first door on the left, so I tried it. Nope, it was a dark room with empty kegs. Pretty normal, maybe he meant the right door. Nope, dark room with extra supplies. I started to wonder if I was too drunk to follow directions, but then I noticed I could see a light under the door at the end of the hallway. That must be the bathroom. Or so I thought. I opened the door to find a group of people in very sharp business attire seated around an oval table. They were clearly having a meeting of some sort with their laptops out. They were incredibly surprised to see me. They all froze in place and we all looked at each other for a good 15 to 30 seconds. Finally, one of the guys says, "What the hell are you doing here, mate?" I replied, "I'm just looking for the bathroom. The door guy told me it was up here." They all looked a little confused, but the guy responded, "We don't have a restroom in this building. Now please leave." I apologized and closed the door, then headed back down the staircase, confused as hell. The good news was that my urge to pee went away. I slid past the group at the table and returned to my wife, who had ordered some fish and chips, and told her all about what happened. We both agreed it was strange, but ordered another round and thought nothing of it. About 5 minutes later, I noticed the guy in the very nice looking suit come down the stairway. He saw me, then went to the security guy at the front and said something to him, then pointed at me. I almost pooped myself. The bouncer walks up to me and says, "You guys have to leave." I told him that I had not yet paid my tab, and he said not to worry about it, just go ahead and leave. I obliged. My wife and I stand outside the bar while we wait for our Uber to take us back to our hotel. The bouncer is sitting there just staring at us. It was a very awkward 5-minute wait. When our Uber gets there, the bouncer says in a very Jamaican accent, "You'll have a very good night," followed by a very loud laugh. To this day, one of the weirdest events of my life. Why were they having a business meeting at 11 p.m. in a pub on a Saturday night? Why did the bouncer tell me to go upstairs when he knew there was no bathroom? Why did they kick us out afterwards? Why did the bouncer creepily laugh at us? We have no idea what happened, but we love to tell this story and see what everyone else's theories are. I can only assume English gangsters, or maybe, I don't know, shareholders in the property meeting for whatever reason. Like, that's a thing, I think. And I mean, Soto, why not? You own a pub. Why not just meet at 11 o'clock at night, drink to your heart's content while getting some goddamn work done? I was living in San Marcos, Texas in early 2003. My boyfriend at the time and I were heading home from a party around 2 or 3 a.m. when we get stopped at a train crossing and a super long train is going by. I mean, we sat there for a solid 15 minutes watching this train go by. Some of the cars had slats or cage walls, so you could see what was in the cars when they were backlit by the streetlights. We could clearly make out a large amount of military equipment was being moved down to the coast, or maybe an airfield. Within a month or so, it was publicly announced that the US was invading Iraq. Shared the house with my parents. Got a letter from ISP for illegal downloading. It was smut that involved multiple people. Had to tell my 70-year-old father that I knew and where he could find the free stuff online. A conversation I'm sure many of us never wish to have. Back in 2012-ish, I ran a food truck in Chicago. Chicago apparently let the Restaurant Association practically write the food truck ordinance. The ordinance stated that trucks could only be parked for a total of 2 hours at a time. We needed more time than that to make the sales we needed to be profitable. My boss had a few restaurants and the Restaurant Association wanted him as a member, so we got to sit in on a meeting and make our case about the parking time. During this meeting, they were having a discussion about how to kill the new minimum wage laws that were being discussed. It was like I was seeing the elite discuss how to keep the common people down, and it made me so incredibly angry. Doing retail PC repair, I found a massive folder of CP on a customer's laptop. Called the cops, state police, and FBI were there within 30 minutes. He ended up getting like 20 years. I was in a church in France once and it was pretty empty, very run down and had bullet holes in the walls, presumably from World War II. Anyways, on the right-hand side of the church, there was a wooden floorboard covered up by carpets. Curiosity got the better of my brother and he lifted it to find a passageway down to a tomb with skeletons and coffins without lids on them. I recently looked at the photos we took and it was truly creepy. My 65-year-old mother getting out of her wheelchair and walking around like it was nothing. She'd been wheelchair bound for 5 years at this point. I'd had my suspicions, but had talked myself out of them because that was ridiculous. Who would pretend to be wheelchair bound just for the attention? Sadly, when you are around long enough, you find that people are willing to do lots of things simply for attention. While looking for my birth certificate, I found a death certificate for a brother I never knew I had. This made me curious. I looked a little further and found family photos from my mom's previous marriage I was never told about, as well as her divorce records. She had a whole other family before ours and never told us, but I'll never bring it up to her because it's really none of my business. I opened the deep freezer and saw a severed German shepherd's head. I worked at a university animal research hospital. I knew better than to look in there. Worst fear confirmed. Also saw a window into the digestive system of a cow, and a dead horse lifted by forklift into a truck for disposal. I do kind of wish I could unsee all of that. It sounds like an unpleasant and kind of gruesome job, but it also sounds like an interesting one. Grew up with separated parents and my mother worked her butt off to provide us with a lifestyle we definitely didn't deserve. 60 plus hours every week while my siblings and I fought constantly, verbally and physically. One Christmas, we wanted a really expensive toy. Well, we went on a scavenger hunt to find it, and we did. As soon as we told her, she broke down in tears. I'll never forget the pure regret I felt in that moment. I felt like an absolute douchebag, and still do. One day, I'm going to provide for my mother with everything she deserves and more, and make sure she never has to lift a finger once she retires. Amen to that, brother. I also lived in a single household my whole life, and my mother is an absolute angel who has provided me with the best care that she can, and she deserves the world. The cream will rise to the top. Hope you enjoyed that bootleg Randy Savage. Rest in peace, Macho Man. What happened at the worst party you've ever been to? I went to a friend's graduation party after high school. I wasn't great friends with him, but I figured I would stop by with my girlfriend because he was nice enough to invite me. The party was so done up, tables full of food, streamers, confetti, all that junk, and my girlfriend and I were the only ones there. I felt awful. His parents clearly went all out to celebrate it, and it was so uncomfortable being one of 5 people there, including him and his parents. I felt awful for him. We stayed for hours out of pity and just kind of made small talk. Super depressing. We went to a friend's 40th birthday last year. She's burned some bridges lately and had an ugly divorce. My husband and I didn't want to go, but we felt like it would be good to show up. Same thing, lavishly decorated, amazing food, lots of drink. We were tastefully late and arrived to find her alone, weeping in the kitchen. There was no escape, even after she chastised us for being so late. So freaking sad. And all she wanted to talk about was that she was sure other folks would show up soon. Leaving was way more uncomfortable than staying, but by 1 a.m. it was clear no one else was coming. We were full and tipsy and walked home in a depressed silence. High school, late 80s, an outside party with a bonfire to celebrate the end of the school year. Some numbnuts throws a glass bottle of beer into the fire, and about 20 minutes later that bottle explodes and shoots a stream of boiling beer all over a girl's crotch and legs. Ambulance was called. I believe she required several skin grafts over several months. I can still remember her shrill screaming and then her passing out. I had kind of a similar thing happen, but with far less of a horrible climax to it, where some guy who crashed a camping party that we were doing, lots of beer and all that stuff, threw a beer can on the fire. That beer can popped due to the heat and the gas releasing all of a sudden, and it landed on a friend's tent, burning their tent down, and they had to sleep with me the night. My brother was at a party once where there were more than a couple underage drinkers present. The house they were at had a thin driveway, so all the cars were packed into a bottleneck. The night wore on, and around 1 a.m, someone decided they wanted to go home. They found the girl who owned the car at the front of the bottleneck and asked her to move her car so she could get out. She said she couldn't because she had a breathalyzer installed in her car and it wouldn't start until someone sober blew into it. They went around the party and tried to find anyone who hasn't been drinking and couldn't find one. Another guy had the brilliant idea of asking the cool 20-something dude next door to do it. So an envoy of teens heads over to the house next door and asks the dude living there if he would please blow into a breathalyzer so they could leave. The dude takes a minute to look the group over, takes a drag of his cigarette and says, "You're gonna give me $25 for every person at the party or I'm calling the cops." He certainly has the makings of a savvy businessman. My sister's birthday was in the middle of the school holidays, and for her 7th birthday, she had a party that no one turned up to. Turns out our mother put the wrong date on the invite, so a lot of people had tried to come over the day before whilst we were out. This makes me feel very grateful that a large breadth of the guests, I suppose, I invite to parties usually show up. Some girl apparently had made out with a guy who wasn't her boyfriend before leaving. Someone at the party tells him via text, and a little while later someone is kicking down the door. He barges in, waving a gun around, screaming, "Which one of you douchebags made out with my girl?" People are ducking, scurrying away, and I'm just standing there thinking, if this is how I die, I'm going to be so mad. Host, who knew him, quickly pushed him out the door. Host just walks in and says, "Jerry, you're ruining another party? That's it. I don't care if you're armed and dangerous. Get the hell out of my house." My pal had a birthday sleepover. We were in 8th or 9th grade, I think. Street Fighter 2 had just came out for the SNES, so that was basically all we did. His parents had laid out some snacks and drinks on a party table, and there was one of these huge bags of party-sized Doritos there. We were playing Street Fighter when one of the guys grabbed a chip, bit into it, and yelled, "Oh, this chip is wet." He began investigating the bag, and we quickly discovered all the chips were wet. The birthday boy's 5-year-old brother had taken advantage of our Street Fighter distraction and licked all of the Dorito dust from every chip and placed them back in the bag. We found him playing in his room, his face covered in the implicating dust. This reminds me of a significantly less disgusting prank I wanted to pull on my brother, where I took all the soft chocolate-filled bits from a box of Cocoa Pops Rocks, if anyone remembers that cereal. Months go by. Turned out he didn't really eat cereal anymore, so I had to eat this whole bowl of, the hard bits in Cocoa Pops Rocks, and I was like, well, damn, that was a waste of time. And I also remember one time my brother tried to give me a sandwich, a jam sandwich, which as a little boy was my favorite, but I had so little trust in him, I was like, "What did you do to it?" "Nothing." And I looked in it. I just immediately examined the sandwich, opened it up, and there was just a pair of sardines in it. Went to a bachelor party at a house someone rented with a buddy. We got there late, so everyone was pretty lit by the time we got there, especially the bachelor. Now, he had hired like 4 entertainers of a certain variety for the party to walk around and dance for everybody, but at one point, the entertainers took the bachelor to the middle of the room, and they were going to do a dance just for him. Again, by this time, the dude is gone, but he managed to stumble into a chair in the middle of the room. The entertainers set up this kiddie pool in front of him, and a couple of them were going to wrestle each other, covered in baby oil. While they were oiling each other up in the middle of the room, one of the other entertainers starts to dance for the guy, and well, she made it past like one verse of Pour Some Sugar on Me when homie just threw up everywhere. I mean, this was like someone turned on a fire hose of vomit. Of course, he just drenched the poor girl that was dancing for him, which made her freak out and run away towards the kiddie pool, which, may I remind you, now has 2 oiled up entertainers. And this lady, covered in vomit, slips, takes the other girls down with her, and she throws up all over them. At this point, there's 3 entertainers flailing around like fish out of water, trying desperately to get out of a kiddie pool covered in baby oil and vomit, slipping and falling over each other while the bachelor is just passed the hell out, covered in vomit, drooling on himself in a chair in the middle of the room. And just to add to this, I guess the entertainers bring a guy with them for protection or whatever, and he is losing his crap. He's trying to get the girls out of the pool, getting all sorts of nasty stuff on himself, slipping around while just repeating, "What the hell?" over and over. Good times. For some more than others, surely. White racist redneck guy took off his shirt to reveal prison swastika tattoos, also pulled out a gun saying he would go commit hate crimes. He began waving the gun around, getting upset. He was already super wasted. I left the room and just about left the party, but the guy who owned the house made him put his gun out in his car. Fast forward a couple hours, we were playing beer pong. Drunk racist swastika dude was playing on a tee with his wife. Me and my best friend were his opponents. He was too drunk to hit anything, and his sober wife sucked. So he used distraction tactics. He took out his pecker and flopped it into the cups. His pecker was freaking huge. After a while, that stopped phasing us, so he decided to take his 20-year-old wife's clothes off. He stripped her naked while she was sober, the only girl at the party, in front of like 20 other drunk dudes. She did not look comfortable, but also, for whatever reason, didn't stop him. After a while, once that wore off, he ordered her to go to our side of the table and flirt with us while she was naked. That's when I left. Next time I saw him was after my friend's death. Drunk racist dude had given my buddy a bunch of pills, and my buddy, like an idiot, took them. Started feeling weird, drove home, and died when his heart blew up. Nobody found him for 3 days. Drunk racist dude showed up at my work, crying because he hadn't been invited to the funeral, because he had essentially killed him. He was upset that nobody seemed to care about him and that even his wife had left him. Thank Christ. I don't know why he thought I would care, but he said I was the only one he could talk to. I had only met him twice before this. It was awkward, and I told him he'd be okay. He just needed to figure some stuff out. I was pretty honest with him about all the crap that he had done, which was stupid. He agreed. I bought him a pack of cigarettes. I worked at a gas station at the time, and he rode off on his motorcycle. Never heard from him again after that. No idea what happened. I'm curious about what other company this person keeps to even be in the vicinity of this individual. Like, I'm all for having a diverse, rich group of friends from all walks of life, whether they be liberal, conservative, religious, non-religious, but at a certain point, you gotta look at someone and go like, I don't even want to be in the same vicinity as you. Somebody brought their baby. Keep in mind, we were all 17, so it was like, what the hell? My 9th birthday party, I invited the entire class as well as my only friends. They went to another school. The only person that showed up was my grandpa. Over 10 years ago, my employees got together to throw me a going-away party. It was held at a local bar that had closed to the public, just for the party, so of course I'm feeling really special. There was a kid there, around 19 years old, who was a really good guy but generally attracted trouble. I used to talk to him all the time, and any time I sensed that he was about to step and do something stupid, I used to always say, you know, the worst gift a kid can give his mother, a dead son. There's a long story behind that, but it just somehow became a thing I always said to him. Anyway, I gave a quick speech and started to duck out just as things were livening up so everybody could have their fun while I returned to my wife and our newborn. I bumped into that kid on the way out, talked to him a bit, and of course the dead son line was the last thing I said before I left. Actually, I said, you know, the worst gift, and he answered, a dead son, gave me a hug, and that was it. Pretty obvious how this story ends. Got the call a few hours later telling me he'd been killed in a car wreck. Turns out that he was trying to do good. Hadn't drank a drop, no drugs or anything. He just got into the wrong car and let a drunk idiot drive him home. There were about 4 kids in the car, and he was the only one that didn't walk away. Sad. A friend told me about this corporate party held for the clients he was at. Open bar, but pretty dull, with people being on their best behavior to schmooze and make the clients feel important. It was open bar in the sense that employees were understood to hold it together. One very, very low on the totem pole employee got hammered drunk with one of their biggest clients and proceeded to get to third or fourth base in the pool for like half an hour. He was fired the following Monday. Probably worth it to him as he was making minimum wage. My wife was on her way up to the north of England to be a bridesmaid for her friend who she has known since they were young. Her friend has learning disabilities, but seems happy with her husband-to-be. On the morning of the wedding, the groom was arrested for bad-touching young children. He was apparently a known pedophile. The bride's family went ahead with the wedding reception anyway. If they actually knew, that is utterly insane to me. An old friend of mine who unfortunately is no longer with us used to throw house parties all the time in high school. It would usually be 15 to 30 people getting wasted and doing illegal substances. This one particular time he hosted a massive high school party because his parents weren't home. So he had probably between 80 to 90 of us teenagers at his house partying like crazy and using every illegal substance that we could get our hands on. About an hour and a half goes by, and people are messed up and having a blast. I was toasty. My buddy who hosted the party filled up capsules with illegal high, and he was swallowing those all night. So, like I said, an hour and a half goes by, and someone asks him where his parents went on vacation. His response? They're not on vacation. They went out to watch a movie. Just then is when the car rolls up, and suddenly a bunch of drunken stone punks pour out of every orifice of the house to the closest park. Every single person in that house took off. Everyone, even the guy who hosted the party. I don't know if he was worried his parents would kill him, or maybe he was so messed up he just forgot that he was at his own house. Man, I missed that guy. I was in high school and a classmate was moving, and his family had already gone to the new house. The old house was going to be torn down and was vacant, so he threw a break my stuff party. People showed up with baseball bats, all kinds of stuff, and I felt underdressed with an axe handle. Alcohol was involved. I was greeted at the door by a guy with a six-shooter in his waistband holding a chainsaw. The event only went downhill from there. I was 16 and now, many years later, I'm a dad. It makes me cringe very hard that my offspring would never attend an event like that. Not gonna lie, that sounds pretty fun. But I'd probably be like bringing stuff or I'd be like, is this okay to break? Is this okay to break? And it's like, everything's okay to break. I'd be self-conscious about it. I went to the beach for a friend's birthday party. After the sun went down, we drove back to her house, about 30 minutes away, to continue the party. When we got home, her dog was dead. Because she lived in a rural area, the other guys and I had to dig a hole and bury it so the coyotes wouldn't consume the carcass. Burying a dead dog is the weirdest thing I've ever done at a birthday party. Good Lord, I can only imagine just how devastated that girl would have been. I'd be heartbroken if I came home for a party and my dog was dead. That'd just be party's cancelled. Maybe sit around and feel bad and play Mario Kart for a bit, but I'd probably be losing with all the tears in my eyes. Halloween 2007. Random friend of devil's lettuce dealer having a party at the house across the street from the religious college APU. Those kids party hard. Best buddy and I made Roman armor with sheet metal by hand. We were definitely proud and looked kinda cool, I must say. Anyway, we show up to this party and there are maybe 20 people. The house is really small. Dude whose place it is like extremely stoked on our costumes. Makes us feel really welcome, which is nice at a stranger's party. He asks us if we can guard the keg and says we can drink all we want from it. We agree, of course. He has the keg in the laundry room, which is small. We chill and drink lots and meet lots of cool people getting beers. Hour rolls by and we realize that the party has gotten huge. 2 new kegs delivered, well over 150 people. The house is so full, it's scary. We are still at the keg and the bathroom is far away. My buddy is wasted and decides to pee into the washer. No regrets on his part. I try to make my way through the crowd, which is utterly impossible. My hand-cut sheet metal armor is poking and slicing people the more I push. Bad idea. People start screaming and laughing. Suddenly, some girl had to poop so bad that she just popped down in the crowd and let loose. The cops are also breaking up the party. House smells horrible. Friend and I are the last ones out. Poop smeared all over the floor, trampled and painted everywhere. Cops are dying laughing at the situation. I puke outside soon as we exit, like gallons of beer puke. Cops compliment my costume while crying, laughing. That was the highlight of the night, and that chick must not have pooped for days. This entire topic is reminding me of why I simultaneously miss and don't miss wild parties. I was at a trashy shotgun wedding reception and slipped off to take a whiz in the bushes. When I came back, there were two blonde strippers dressed as cops arresting the groom. I said, "Who the hell rents strippers for a wedding?" Really loud right as the music cut out. They were not strippers. Went to an isolated cottage in the woods up north that my friend's rich family owned. There was about 15 of us. Everyone except for me imbibed in some illegal substances. I don't do that stuff, really, but have no problem with them if they want to. I was getting drunk and had enough fun with that. Everything was going great until one guy started to have a really bad trip. Me and the guy who owned the cottage were the ones taking care of him because I was the most sober and he felt responsible for his parents' cabin. It turned really scary really fast. I pretty much carried him up the stairs into a room before someone else noticed and got a friend to come help me. We'd turn on the light and he'd start screaming that it was too bright. We'd turn off the light. He'd scream that it was too dark. He kept complaining that he had to use the bathroom, but wouldn't get up when we urged him to. My friend told me to fetch a different friend who said that he was not in the state of mind to deal with it and refused. Another friend told me that she knows him better than anyone else, so she should go talk to him. I tried to stop her, but she dashed past me and ran upstairs into the room and came out crying because he'd punched her in the face and then wet himself and peed all over her. We didn't know what to do. We just kind of left him in the room and went downstairs while all that was heard from upstairs was screaming and banging. We sat around in a circle and debated whether or not we should call an ambulance. Everyone ultimately decided against it because they didn't want to be fined for having illegal substances. The noises eventually stopped and we all went to bed. The next day, we found out that our friend had felt like he was trapped in his own skin and was trying to claw, bite, and rip it off. He was covered in bite marks and scratches. Everyone treated him like a monster and avoided him the next day, which made me really angry because it could have just as easily happened to any of them. That sounds like one major bummer of a night, and I sympathize in the disappointment with the other friends. Like, damn, to treat him so callously after, having a bad trip and whatnot. Hopefully that didn't just, put a wedge between that guy and the rest of the friendship group, because, God, that'd be sad. College party. Pre-drank with my buddies and their roommate Ryan. Ryan gets drunk, high, super confidence, and starts teaching us how to not take any guff from no one. We're walking to the party, and with zero context, he's preaching shoulders back, stand up straight, get right up in the guy's face. No idea why he feels the need to be such a tough guy. Within 5 minutes of being at the party, another guy puts Ryan in a headlock and blasts him in the face a quick 5 or so times. Blood everywhere, hosts freaking out. It turns out they were arguing about how good a mutual friend was at water skiing. Am I the only one confused about how that would lead to such violence? The only thing I can say that's resulted of this is that now I am more interested in how good this person is at water skiing and whose opinion was whose. Kid hosting the party didn't plan on dad coming home. Dad showed up, freaked out, cuts off his kid's finger with a decorative sword. Party ended. Kid went to the hospital to have his fingers reattached and showed back up at the house we moved the party to with a giant cast on. No, the dad didn't get in trouble. The kid was probably 19 or 20 and must have not told the hospital what had happened. Also, he cut them off closer to the tip, not the entire finger. I'm guessing they just sewed them back on. I don't think it required actual surgery. It happened relatively early in the evening and he didn't show back up at the next house until hours later. It was probably close to sunrise. It wasn't really a party at the next house. It was more like half the people from the sword house sitting around drinking and talking about how messed up the night was. That would certainly be a night to remember for just about everyone involved, I must say. That's hilarious, but also tragic. I'm mixed on this. It was the first party I ever went to. And the worst party I ever went to. It was all going great until this dude, drunk, caught his girlfriend making out with his friend and threw a freaking TV at him. Then he just went absolutely ape crazy and started screaming at him in the GF. I, like the others, stood in shock and slowly proceeded to finish my Pepsi and then get the hell out. After I left, my friend said, "Waste of a perfectly good TV." I was pledging to a fraternity and we had a crazy party. Towards the end, there were passed out people all over and a few brothers and myself who were still awake at 3 a.m. trying to kick strangers out. The last group was this passed out girl and her friend sitting on our couch on the first floor, and after much prodding and poking, the passed-out chick begins to stir and moan, then proceeds to drunkenly sit up and mumble, "I need to pee." She stands up all wobbly, then suddenly takes off her pants. Her friend has a shocked face, knowing what's about to happen. Brother Joe has a huge grin on his face, and I'm like, what the hell? The drunk chick squats and begins to pee all over our tiles. It was hilarious, and when she's done, her embarrassed friend grabs her and quickly leaves. We're all laughing our butts off when suddenly Joe abruptly stops laughing and yells to me, "Pledge, grab 'em up and clean this up." What's something you found out about your significant other years into the relationship that made you reevaluate the whole thing? 9 months into the relationship, I found out he had a court date. He told me it was for assaulting a bouncer. Very soon after, his mother admitted that he had a court date for assaulting his underage relative. When I confronted him about this, he said that the underage girl raped him. When I told him he was full of crap, he went on to admit that she did something for him that I will not say. Soon after, I went into his lawyer's office with him and read the transcript. It turns out he had raped his underage niece twice and just tells a different lie to anyone who asks him why he's in jail. Total piece of crap. I ran very fast, haven't seen him since, and I hope I will never see him again. About 1 year in, he told me he was about to get full custody of his son. I didn't know he had a son. About a year in, I found out she lied to me about getting an STD test. Turned out she had more than one STD, which somehow I tested clean for. There is actually a reason for that. Some STDs have an easier time transmitting from men to women than from women to men. When I had my first child, the pregnancy wasn't a surprise or an accident. We talked and planned. He got a little overbearing during the pregnancy, like insisting on breastfeeding without even discussing it with me. I put it down to new dad nerves and not knowing any better. Turns out that was only the tip of the iceberg. He believed that children were completely and totally a wife's responsibility. He wouldn't change a diaper. He wouldn't pick up the baby when it cried. No way would he get up in the middle of the night. He expected me to work a full-time job plus do all of the childcare. At that point, I was confused and appalled, but I told myself he just needed time to adjust. I realized how delusional I was when the baby got sick while he was on a fishing trip. The doctors thought the baby had meningitis, so not just sick, but life-threatening sick. I called and asked him to come home. He refused. He'd paid for 2 more days of fishing, and he didn't want to lose the money. She would lie about tiny, inconsequential things, made me question my own perception of truth and self-instinct. Eventually caught her in a lie, and she denied even when presented with full proof. It wasn't something huge, but it was something that opened my eyes a little. My friend swears I was being gaslit. Out of nowhere, a year into being married, he said he wants to join the Marine Corps. He also wanted me to drop out of law school, birth babies, take care of his mother, and run a household, all while he's deployed. Hard pass. Found his hidden folder on his phone, blackmailed girls for nudes, stole nudes from girls, pretended to be someone else and sexted his sister without her knowing it was him. Constantly made me feel like I was crazy or overreacting. Also realized what him calling me a manic pixie dream girl meant. I'm hardly a perfect specimen of a human being. I would like to believe that I have a respectable amount of moral fiber, but boy, do y'all know how to pick 'em. 7 years in, after having been married a year, my husband finally confessed to me that he was raped as a child for 6 years by his older brother. It really threw the struggles of our SX life into perspective. Now knowing this, I have done all kinds of research, found how to support rape victims, info, and I've changed how I behave when we're intimate. We're working on it. I tell him every time we're intimate that it's an act of love and he's safe with me, and we have our safe word for general use if he's feeling overwhelmed. We're really making progress. I think things are better now. He's starting to understand that it's love in our marriage, and I want him to want me, and I want him to be a little controlling when he feels up to it. He's grown a lot, he's a very strong person, and I'm immeasurably lucky to have him. That is a lot of trauma and baggage to take on, but with the right person and a whole lot of love, I think you'll get through it. I realized he would always blame me for his angry outbursts and mistakes. He punched a wall and screamed about a homework assignment he didn't understand because I was sitting on the couch quietly. Then after he was finished blaming me and realized I was upset, he became all sad and wanted me to comfort him. What a pathetic human being. I'm glad I've grown past accepting that sort of behavior. That my husband wanted to start fires and kill police officers and was planning on framing me for it so his girlfriend could move in while I did his time in prison for him. We were driving home from a dinner in which we drove separately to, and without knowing it, she cut me off by merging into my lane last minute without using a blinker. I was annoyed at first, but when I recognized it was her car, it made me feel very strange. I think that makes sense. Knowing that your significant other might be really reckless on the road is worrying, concerning, very concerning, especially if you plan to have kids. That she cheated on me and that she lied about being psychologically abused by her father. She lied about being financially responsible and was formulating a plan to murder me. Today, my girlfriend told me that every time we argue, she wants to stab me. Now, she might not mean it, but that is certainly a red flag. That she had been in contact with her exes, met them, and regularly cheated on me with just whomever. 8 years, she was really good at hiding her tracks. I only found out because I contracted an STD, curable fortunately, from her. I was really glad we didn't have kids and divorced her, moved away and drank too much. Then I met the most awesome person in the world, who I married, had kids, and didn't know relationships could be this good. Turned out my husband, who was sober from illegal substances and alcohol, had been using booger sugar monthly for the last 15 years, just enough to maintain apparently. We have worked it out, but I was almost gone at that point. He hit a few addictions and withdrawals from me. I forgave him. He stole $4,000 from our joint savings that only I contributed to. I forgave him. He sexted and was trying to meet up with randos, which made me realize I should probably leave. But the thing that made me certain was when I realized he didn't actually want an equal relationship. He expected me to shop, cook, clean, and be responsible for him for the rest of our lives. He pretended to want what I wanted for years, and I was dumb enough to believe his excuses on why he just couldn't do it yet. I demand and I deserve a reasonable equal relationship. Divorce was one of the best things I ever did. That she wants to have fights and be mad. For example, we currently haven't spoken for 3 days and she's sleeping in the other room because I accidentally texted "good night, sleep tight" instead of just "good night" because I was the one going to bed, not her. So in her mind, that text must have been meant for another woman. We live together, we work together, we share a car. How on God's green earth could I have a side chick? She told me when we first met that she was broken as she suffers from depression. I didn't brush it off, so to speak, but just kind of thought, yeah, whatever, it won't be that bad. It's not because I don't think depression isn't serious, but I just had never even really been in contact with someone with depression, so I kind of had no idea what it entails. Hopefully that makes sense. 5.5 years of being together later, and holy cow, damn, depression is just super serious. I've been in situations and scenarios I never imagined being in because of her and her depression. She's phoned me up twice while she was working in London. I live 60 miles away in Kent, saying she loves me and she's sorry and she's going to end it. What the hell do I do? I didn't know what to frickin' do. Thankfully, both of those times she never went ahead with it, but still ended up in a hospital, and obviously I went up to her. Sometimes she's just crying and crying and crying and crying. Countless visits to the GP for talks and medication. Again, things I've never dealt with before, and at first I was extremely uncomfortable about it all. This isn't for me kind of stuff. But the good news is it and she are part of my life now. I don't mind all of the above anymore. She loves me and I love her. What's even more amazing is that I'm the one that keeps her going, she says. This is life, and I'm now fully aware of the seriousness of depression. She recently got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Made me look back and realize a lot of her actions and anger stemmed from that. She just started mood stabilizers and has found a great therapist to help her work through everything. But it would have almost been a deal breaker if she didn't try to actively manage it. She lied to me, or rather flat out denied telling me that she has herpes. Guess who has herpes now? Her reasoning? I thought you wouldn't talk to me if you found out I had it. I would have kept talking to her, but perhaps I would have wrapped it up first before, doing the deed so soon. Just frickin' disclose that information at the start. Don't be a butt who gives someone an STD knowingly. Yeah, that is definitely just completely and utterly unacceptable. 7 years in, I found out he was a high school dropout without even a GED. He had initially told me he was a game design major, turned down a job opportunity or internship, I can't recall which, with EA Toronto because he didn't want to leave me. I literally told him, go, we can figure other crap out later. This won't wait. I should have known then. Ugh, love is blind, but only for so long. Turns out when she said she wanted to get married, she actually meant that she just wanted to get married, by which I mean wanting to get married is not the same thing as wanting to marry me. I just happened to be the guy that she was with at the time when her friends were getting married, and it was making her jealous, and her mother was also putting pressure on her to get married. It happens to a lot more people than you think. After several years together, my ex told me nonchalantly one evening that he stole $500 from one of his best friends because he really needed it. This ex was a college-educated person trying to get into dental, medical, or pharmacy school. Not only was there no reason for this person to steal their friend's money, I didn't understand how someone could do that and feel no remorse whatsoever, especially to someone they considered a good friend. It was at that moment that I seriously began to believe I had given my trust and love to a total sociopath. It was the catalyst that pushed me out of the relationship. I found out later that while I was working on a degree in another city, he found dates on Tinder, spinning lies about being in med school and owning a luxury condo overlooking the Wisconsin state capitol. He'd take girls for rides on my motorcycle and bring them back to the condo I owned. I don't know who or how many, but a neighbor specifically went out of their way to tell me what was going on. One of his Tinder dates was with a good friend's best friend, and I heard through her the lies about being rich and working in medicine. A high school classmate of his texted me to warn me the same thing. He hit on a girl at a reunion by saying he was in med school at Wisconsin, but the girl was actually in med school at Wisconsin, and she promptly told everyone about the exchange. When I went to kick him out of the condo, he told me that his mother had turned into a raging alcoholic and that kicking him out would mean he couldn't take care of her anymore. He stole a whole bunch of stuff from me, some of which he still has, and after all of it, he had the gall to text and ask if he could manage my finances for me at his new job in, believe it or not, wealth management. I guarantee you he's stealing from every one of his clients. But when he said he stole from his friend, it really changed my opinion that he wasn't just an insecure millennial trying to find his way between college and the real world. He's a Class A raging narcissist, and holy crap, am I glad he's out of my life forever. A little over a year after being officially together, I finally put together that they had the cancer gene in their family. Despite being crazy in love with her, this made me want to back out because I totally saw a future with her. Her grandpa and dad both had head and neck cancers, 2 aunts and 1 uncle were survivors of ovarian and lung cancer. I knew I wanted kids and she did too, so there was always this looming fear that our future kids might get it. Still went through because she mattered more to me than all my fears combined. Life plays a cruel joke, and despite having no vices and being an occasional drinker, she got the big C as well. Head and neck, just like Grandpa and her dad. Lost her a little over a year ago. Still no regrets. Still love her a lot. Damn. My wife and I married quickly without getting to know each other much. She was raised in a Mormon home and I had converted to Mormonism at 18. We played the roles of provider and nurturer in our marriage according to the teachings of the faith. I left the faith about 6 years ago. She stopped attending about 2 to 3 years ago. The very difficult conversation when I left made us talk about things more than we ever had before. We dove deeply into so many aspects of our life, marriage, and desires for the future. I realized after years of marriage that she was actually an incredibly smart, dynamic woman. I loved her a lot before this. I always thought she was amazing, but because of the dynamics of each of our upbringings and the dynamic of the faith, I never realized how intelligent she was. I ask her opinions on things all the time now. We left our faith, ditched most of our baggage from our sexist upbringings, and I realized how great of a lifelong companion I have, and I am ecstatic about this. That he had been cheating on me and racking up debt. We had gotten married and made life plans that he had always known would never come to fruition because of what he was doing behind closed doors. Yet he allowed me to marry him anyway, knowing I was signing up for a life I did not want and that we did not agree on. I would have been the one to bear the brunt of the consequences for his actions. Well, I'm glad you got out of there. He told me from the very get-go that he was diagnosed with Asperger's in grade school, but I just brushed it off because I know many people who half-heartedly claim to be autistic. But a couple weeks ago, I was lying in bed while he was putting away one of his 50 pocket watches in his holding box that he keeps in pristine condition tucked away in his sock drawer. Then he proceeded to pick out a new axe to carry in his backpack full of supplies, and for some reason, it just hit me for the first true time that he is totally 100% on the spectrum.
and it made me think back to the times when he has done things that absolutely infuriate me, and he has no idea he had done something wrong, and suddenly I could see that he wasn't being manipulative or underhanded. His brain simply works in a different way than mine, and he even tried to warn me of this. I just for some reason chose to disregard the information. He is super willing to meet me halfway, even when he doesn't understand why something bothers me. He acknowledges how I feel and he stops doing it. He is the goofiest, most eccentric ball of love I have ever met, and coming to terms with his autism has made me love him all that much more.
Men, I don't know who needs to hear this, but there's still hope.
He was always very secretive and a little paranoid. One example, I learned about 15 years into the relationship that his birthday is not in May like he said, but in November. When he moved to the US from England in the 1970s, they had written it down incorrectly in his passport, and he never changed it to his correct birth date. I still don't know why. Every flat and clean surface can and will become a closet space. It was my girlfriend of 2 years last night in town before leaving for college. She told me she was hanging out with her friends, which I was fine with, as we had planned to see each other every weekend. Turns out she didn't see her friends. She hung out with her ex-boyfriend and then left for school the next day and didn't answer her phone for a week. First time I talked to her after she left, she told me what she did and broke up with me. See, this kind of thing is why people have trust issues. That and much worse things. Things that have already been covered in this video even. There's a ton of things I discovered over the years we were together, but the biggest one was how he had lied about his exes. He talked terribly about them and would make them all sound like cheaters and liars or just plain psychopathic. It turns out that's not the truth at all. They were none of those things, and I found out the hard way that it was him that embodied those qualities all along. We have broken up and gotten back together many times over the past 6 years, but it ended for the last time this weekend. Good for you.
She is perfectly okay flipping out on the kids. I mean, full on cussing them out and yelling about stuff. I ultimately confronted her about it, and she said, "So everyone else is allowed to express themselves when they're upset, but not me?" We had to have a long talk after that one, as would be expected. Her walls were just too high to ever get through. Intimacy, affection, emotion, romance, all gone, and she was unwilling to change. As can be the case with some to many people for a myriad of reasons, and it can be quite sad. I was just out of high school and was dating a girl. We were fairly serious but young. We went to Subway for lunch, and she was super rude to the poor girl working behind the counter, and after we left, she was saying how stupid she was. Couldn't even make the sandwich right. I started to notice she was rude to lots of service and retail workers. I saw her in a much different light after that. We didn't last very long. I think there's a saying where it goes something like, if someone's nice to you but not to the waiter, then they're probably not really a nice person. We are Texans. He likes beans in his chili, but I've decided I can make it work. 3 years into a 5-year relationship, my now ex-girlfriend finally told me she had a bad eating disorder after I overheard her throwing up after a meal. It was something I suspected in the past and questioned her on, but she was adamant with her denials. This was not the end. In fact, it was really just planting a seed of doubt. 2 years from this point, we were still together, and I was still trying to support her through treatment of her disorder. Eventually, more of her secrets started come out, secretive alcoholism, childhood abuse, cheating. Even with all the secrets and lies, it was not easy to cut ties, but it was needed in order to keep my own sanity. My wife and I have very little boundaries. Oftentimes, while we're having a conversation in our room, one of us needs to use the bathroom. We'll just follow each other in the bathroom and continue talking. If the conversation is good enough, poop won't hinder our dialogue. However, there are times when my wife is in the bathroom and locks the door. I always thought it was weird, but it didn't bother me. We've been married for 9 years now. We met at 15 and are now 28. We've grown up together, graduated together, traveled together. We know each other so well and have nothing to hide from one another, or so I thought. This all changed one day. I was feeding our kids lunch and she was in the bathroom. Unbeknownst to her, she did not lock the door. When I walked in on her, I witnessed something that I never thought I would see, something that lived in the back of my head, but I didn't think it could be real. My wife of 13 years relationship, 9 years of marriage, 3 kids together, was shaving her upper lip. She is Puerto Rican and has a little peach fuzz that you can't even really notice, and she was shaving it like it was a full-on mustache. She looked at me with this embarrassed look, and I thought to myself,
What else is she hiding? I don't know that I'll ever look at her the same again. That one was really cute. I like the tongue-in-cheek nature of it. She would ignore my opinion about anything. It started small, like forcing me to watch movies I didn't like with her. After that, she made dinner with food I disliked, then go to theme parks even though I told her I didn't want to go in a roller coaster. Over the years, it escalated to her saying we wanted at least 3 children. I've never wanted kids, and she knew that. I started to notice I didn't want to spend time with her anymore. It was exhausting, so bye. We were together for 4 years before she told me she was obsessed with Star Wars. Like, what the hell? That's day one stuff. We could have been going to midnight shows and dressing up. Oh, the squandered time. One of you could have been Chewbacca and the other could be Han Solo. I didn't have much to do with my significant other, now ex's parents, for the first few years. This changed after we were married, and I discovered that she was basically a psychological carbon copy of her father, and I, her mother. Only problem with that was her father was a domineering man who wore his wife down over many years to the point that she was basically mute and offered no resistance to him. What he wanted, he got. My ex was already showing a tendency to bully me into supplication, and I realized I was heading down the same path as her mother. I had already started giving up trying to argue about anything with her. I saw my future quite clearly one day and left. To come to that realization, like, the back and forth and look in the mirror, that must be terrifying. Well, one day I was having a really crappy day at work. Headache, annoyed at my coworkers, etc., and was moaning about it to him. Then he shows up unannounced with Advil and my favorite coconut water, which was really freaking sweet and made my day good again. But then, when I get home, this dude had a new PS4 controller waiting for me, with takeout from my favorite Mexican restaurant. So yeah, reevaluated a whole bunch, and now I'm saving up for a ring. What are some psychological experiments with interesting results? White rats and black rats were raised separately without seeing each other. When a black rat was placed in the white rat's cage, the other rats ostracized him. When white rats and black rats are raised together and a new black rat is placed in a cage, the white rats accept him. So basically, rats are racist unless raised to accept differences. The self-fulfilling prophecy studies are very important to social psychology, and their findings have many real-world applications. Basically, they brought together a group of kids and formed a class with a real teacher. They gave the kids a test for overall academic skill at the start of the course, but didn't really use the scores. Instead, they told the teachers that a few students picked at random were very brilliant and scored very highly. They then observed the class for a long period of time and noticed that the teachers gave the kids they thought were brilliant much more attention. At the end of the study, the kids took the test again, and they found that the kids who were randomly named brilliant at the start actually scored higher than the rest of the class. The kids, again, at the start didn't score any different from the rest of the class, but through the self-fulfilling prophecy, they became the best in their class. This obviously has tons of applications in the real world and especially education. The monster experiment. Although it is horrible how they left the children with mental health issues at the end, the experiment gave very good insight to how to parent a child. In this experiment, they took groups of orphan children and separated them into 3 groups. One was the control, the second were told they had a lisp and were doing bad, and the third was told that their speech was perfect. As the experiment went on, Group 2 began developing lisps after being berated constantly. They became shy and reserved. They were scared to speak because they didn't want to get in trouble because of their poor speaking skills. Group 3, however, had the opposite happen. They spoke better, they were more willing to improve, they were encouraged to keep speaking and told that their speech was amazing and perfect. By the end of the experiment, they had one group with no change, one group with now mentally ill children with a speech impediment, and one group with great speaking skills. It truly shows that encouraging children is the way to go, and that verbal abuse can be just as, if not more, harmful as physical abuse. All things in moderation, as they say. I think any excessive amount of abuse or even nurturing and confirmation or whatever can be bad for anyone growing up. Because on one hand, you get people who grow up into quivering leaves of human beings, and that's unfortunate, but you can grow out of that. And then you have people who just become egotistical or maybe struggle to accept objective facts and maybe don't like it when people disagree with their more subjective opinions. The Monopoly Study by Paul Piff. He basically brought 2 strangers into the lab together and had them play a game of Monopoly together. He randomly assigned one participant to start the game with twice as much money than the other, and that participant also got to roll both dice to get around the board, i.e., the other participant participant started with half the money and could only roll 1 dice. At the end of the game, when he asked the participant who started with more money why he won the game, they would chalk it up to their excellent strategy and gamesmanship, rather than the fact that they had started the game with way more resources. It says a lot about how we deal with being born into a privileged state. I am skeptical as to whether or not you can actually equate real life in a game of Monopoly together and whether or not people would be that blind to their advantages. Not entirely sure if it fits into the category, but the Rosenhan experiment, 13 people feigned mental illness to get into mental hospitals, and all were admitted with different diagnoses. They then assumed their normal personalities, but to be released, they all had to admit that they were mentally ill. There was a second part where a hospital challenged Rosenhan to send multiple fake patients to the hospital, and they would rate their patients on a scale of whether they think they were faking. They identified many possible fakers, but Rosenhan, in fact, hadn't sent anyone. The Three Christs of Ypsilanti. A psychologist forces 3 people who believe that they are Jesus Christ to live together. It does not go well. The psychologist in question, Milton Rokeach, had heard of a case where 2 men who believed that they were Mary, Mother of Christ, were forced to live together, and one of them broke free from their delusion. So he figured 3 Christs. What would happen? They were angry at each other, often had physical fights. They eventually started getting along by avoiding the topic. He would ask them about the others, and each would say that the others were crazy. That they, of course, were the real Jesus. No cures, some unethical stuff, but interesting. I'm a huge fan of Milgram's Small World experiment. It is more sociology than psychology, but I still think it's really cool. Milgram sends out 160 letters containing the name and address of a stockbroker in Boston to people in Omaha, Nebraska. They had to send it to someone they thought would get the letter closer, but they couldn't mail it directly to the stockbroker. Interestingly, most people that sent on the letter sent it on to the same group of people on the 5th degree. It only took 6 people, hence the 6 degrees of separation, to arrive on average. It shows how interconnected our world is, even before the internet, which is happy to think about. That is kind of nice to think about. If you stare into a dimly lit mirror for 10 plus minutes, you start to see hallucinations. What individuals see tends to vary, but they've used this as a test to simulate schizophrenia before because some see monsters, deformities, or general weird stuff. I did a variation of it for a friend in uni and completely wimped out of it after my face started not looking like my face anymore. I had a complete disassociation. I stopped looking and just waited out the time. I loved learning about infant development. My favorite was probably the development of depth perception, or perhaps the fear of heights. We're not born with it, but if I recall correctly, we develop it within the first year or so. Scientists created a raised square platform. Half of the floor was wood and the other half glass. The actual surface of the floor, 1 meter or so below, was white with red polka dots. At varying intervals of age, the babies would be brought in and placed on the wood and encouraged to crawl to their moms, who is standing at the glass end of the platform. In early infancy, babies crawl over there without giving a crap. At some point, though, they stop at the point where the wood meets the glass, or plexiglass, maybe, showing that they recognize the difference in height and the fear of falling. Babies' brains are pretty frickin' cool. It is definitely interesting to watch something that has low intelligence or self-awareness slowly gain more of it over time. You know, it's the process of how having a kid and everything is interesting. Reconsolidation. When you retrieve a memory from your long-term memory, it is susceptible to being manipulated. This can lead to memories being totally changed from the source. This is why eyewitness accounts cannot be fully seen as true. This knowledge is also being used to help people with PTSD by changing the negative memories they have of their particular trauma. The influence of the color red in sports. Judges were shown a video of a Taekwondo match and awarded more points to the red competitor versus the blue competitor. When the colors were digitally reversed, judges awarded more points to the other, now red competitor. Red may be a signal of dominance, as reddened skin is associated with higher testosterone or possibly higher fertility in women. Wearing red may induce intrinsic psychological effects which increase dominance in addition to altering the perception of others. Researchers found that putting red leg bands on birds increased dominant behavior as they took the lion's share of the food. For my psychology degree dissertation, I presented photos of men to be rated on a scale of friendly 0 to threatening 10. Men received a higher threat score if I photoshopped their t-shirt to be red. Mice were put on 2 sides of a wall with a door in. Only the right mouse could open the door. Slowly, they filled the left mouse's room with water, and eventually when the right mouse saw them in danger, they opened the door. However, mice that had previously been on the left side and were now on the right, mice who had previously been wetted, opened the door considerably faster because they knew how unpleasant it was to be in the other scenario. Basically, mice have empathy. That's nice to know, but now I want an experiment where there are stakes, risks. I want there to be a moral dilemma in this situation for the mouse. What do you do, Mr. Mouse? Save the stranger with the cure for the entire mouse colony, or save your family? I just recently heard of blind-sightedness during one of my cognitive psychology classes. Basically, the area of the brain that processes what our eyes see is located at the back of the head, just where your skull starts to get smaller, towards your neck. Because of this, if you hit your head back there quite often, everything will go black for a moment before sight returns again. Sometimes, though, following severe trauma to this area of the brain, like after falling off a ladder onto a curb or something, a person is never able to see again. For a long time, it was assumed that the eyes were somehow incapable of seeing following the trauma, and that was why people were blind. However, it's been shown that it is just the processing of the images that is damaged. In other words, your eyes are still working away, viewing images, but your brain is unable to process the images, so you can't see them. Some experiments looking into this have found that people with damage to this area can still navigate around things in front of them without realizing they are doing it. So if you told someone with this damage to walk down a corridor, and you placed obstacles in their way, they wouldn't be able to see the obstacles, but they could have a void bumping into them because their eyes are still able to view them and send signals to other areas of the brain to avoid knocking things. This is known as blind-sightedness. Blew my mind a little. And with that, you have ruined Daredevil forever. He's not really blind, he's just got blind-sightedness. To like the nth degree, I suppose. One time I participated in a paid research experiment. I was basically tricked into thinking I was drunk. I was placed in a room with 2 other people, and we were instructed to drink vodka with cranberry juice over a period of time while we socialized. After we drank, I was placed in a room where I had to read some flashing words on a computer. I felt pretty drunk at this point. When the researcher came back into the room, he gave me my car keys and said I was never actually given alcohol. He briefly told me that because I was anticipating drinking for this experiment, that my brain had tricked me into feeling the effects of being intoxicated. I immediately snapped out of it and was completely amazed at how I felt. Solomon Ash's experiment on conformity. He set up a test wherein he would show 3 lines of different lengths to 5 or 6 individuals. I forgot the exact number, who had to state which line was the longest of the 3. The thing is, only the last individual is the participant and the others are actors paid to answer in a specific manner. For the first few questions, they chose the correct answer, but later on they start choosing the wrong one. The participants are conflicted as to whether they will say the correct answer or conform to the wrong answer, as to not be judged by others or due to self-doubt of their own answers. In the end, most do conform. It's really interesting since it shows how powerful conformity is in the face of doubt, up to a point that some even question their own sanity during the test. Another variation of the experiment also had interesting results. It had the same setup with 5 individuals, with the last person being the participant. However, this time, some of the actors say the wrong answer while one actor says the correct one. There was an increase in participants who would choose the correct answer and avoid conformity. It shows how much doubt one can have on oneself when alone, but be brought back to self-confidence when they find outside support. Here's a twofer for you. So way back in the day, researchers examined the brains of cab drivers in London versus regular people via brain scanning, MRI I believe, but I can't recall. They found that the cab drivers had cognitive advantages over regular people and also had a larger hippocampus, the area of the brain primarily involved in memory storage and recall. And just the other year, researchers investigated the effects of video games on cognitive decline. They had older people either play Mario 64 or Mario Galaxy, took virtual piano lessons, or they did nothing. This lasted 6 months. The researchers measured brain size before and after the experiment began. They also gave the participants a test on their short-term memory and cognitive functioning before and after the experiment as well. Mario group increased gray matter in the hippocampus and cerebellum, improved short-term memory and cognitive functioning. Piano group increased gray matter in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and cerebellum, no change in cognitive functioning. Control had no significant change. The authors believe that it was because the participants had to learn and navigate through a virtual world in order to beat the game that they wound up developing their short-term memory. The results were similar to those found in cab driver research. Mario doesn't provide players with an in-game in-game map the way Call of Duty does, so they have to develop an internal cognitive map of the virtual world in order to get around it. Now, it's important to remember that the changes in cognitive functioning were very small to the extent that I would argue that they aren't actually meaningful, that the sample size in this experiment were very small, which would have skewed the results, and that it was very recent and still needs to be replicated. But the results to me are fascinating in that they suggest that certain video games may provide certain benefits to older people. I'd really like to see what happens if they had participants play the game for longer than 6 months, since realistically, gamers won't just play games for a 6-month period, they play for years. Man, Mario Galaxy is the bomb. I love that game so much. This is something I've been thinking about lately, actually. I hate the fact that some games nowadays don't have mini-maps. I mean, I used to be great with directions in video games, but I think over time I have gotten worse because of the constant use of mini-maps within video games. The Selective Laziness of Reasoning is an article I found and then partially replicated in my research methods class during my undergraduate. It's so great with a very interesting method and results that make you think about discussion and arguments a lot. Basically, the researchers presented participants with different syllogism, logic puzzles like all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, so Socrates is mortal, etc. And they asked them to provide their answers and also their reasoning for the answers. Later on, participants were asked to return and they presented some of their old answers, but the answers were reversed to be exactly what they had written down previously. But if their own argument from prior was presented as someone else's, they would disagree with it. Essentially, the lesson was we critically evaluate other people's arguments with much more focused lenses, and we afford ourselves less loopholes to jump through to validate and substantiate our own claims. Diet and behavior in children. Sugar and sweets don't make kids hyper. I love this one because it's so counterintuitive and every parent loves to tell you how their kid definitely does. Researchers took a bunch of parents and their kids and split them into 2 groups, those who get healthy fruit and those who get sugary sweets. The kids were separated from their parents for a moment and given the fruit or the sweets. A few minutes later, the parents were brought back in and either told the truth about what they'd been given or lied and told the opposite. The parents and kids were left by themselves with an assortment of toys and the parents were asked to rate their kids' behavior. What they found is that irrespective of what they were actually given to eat, parents who were told their kids had sugary sweets reported worse behavior than those who were told they had fruit. Again, irrespective of what they actually had. The interesting thing is that when you actually looked at the kids' behavior, they really were misbehaving, generally being more inclined to screech, throw toys around, or ignore instructions. Turns out it's actually the parents' behavior that determines how the kids act. The same study has also been done with sugary drinks versus water, same result. Another interesting experiment is the Loftus experiment of fake memories and the power of suggestion. It's basically about implanting memories of events that have never taken place, or alter the subject's detailed memory of that event. You can quite easily test this in real life. Find a busy picture of a village, preferably cartoon and vividly colored, allow a test subject to inspect the picture for 20 to 30 seconds, and let them know that you'll be asking questions. Turn the picture face down and ask 2 to 3 questions about the contents of the picture, preferably easy to answer questions. Was there an X in the picture, or did Y happen? Also mix in a fake question there. For instance, the picture may have had a skyline but no sun. If you ask the subject whether the sun was yellow or orange, chances are that they will create a memory of a sun being visible in the picture and tell you a color. The Loftus experiment has been used to disqualify young children from giving testimonials in judicial proceedings, and follow-up experiments have included implanting memories of fake balloon rides and parents losing the subject in a mall as a toddler. It's quite fascinating. The last 2 stories have done nothing but inform me of one thing and one thing alone: children cannot be trusted. The elevator groupthink study, very amusing and sad at the same time. The experiment involved several actors entering an elevator with an oblivious participant. They then begin to perform a series of odd behaviors, such as they all stood facing the rear of the elevator. Inevitably, everyone else who got on ended up also facing the rear so as to not stand out from the rest. The study demonstrates how easily people succumb to group pressure to behave in a certain way. I don't think these ones are that good in that these events are happening in a vacuum in a very specific place. So if I saw everyone looking the back end of an elevator, for example, I would assume that maybe it's one of those elevators with 2 doors and that everyone else has used it before, especially if it's an elevator that I've never used before. If it's one that I had used before, I'd probably be stood there being like, what the hell is everyone doing? Research into where morality comes from. They asked people taboo questions like, a brother and a sister are alone in a cabin in the woods one night. They are both over 18 and decide to make love once, as they think it will strengthen their relationship. The sister is on birth control and the brother wears a condom, just to be safe. Is this act wrong? Or another question was, a woman is cleaning her house and has no rags, so she finds an old American flag, tears it up, and uses it to clean her house. Is this act wrong? They created stories like this to give an initial reaction of disgust. They would then ask the participant to explain their answers. Most people couldn't give a good answer, only saying it feels wrong. They then went further and the interviewer would try their best to change the participant's mind, saying things like, well, no one saw, no one got hurt, etc., but participants wouldn't change their original response. The conclusion was that people make intuitive, emotional, split-second decisions all the time, and the reasoning, logical portion of the brain tries its best to explain the decision, but cannot change the initial decision. See The Rightful Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Subjects were tested for introvert versus extrovert personality types. Prediction was that when placed in a sensory deprivation chamber, the introverts would be able to handle it easily while the extroverts would not. Exactly the reverse was found. Introverts became agitated quickly and performed all manner of self-stimulation. Extroverts quickly went to sleep. What the findings showed was that it's introverts who are the sensation seekers, needing stimulation from the outside world. Extroverts create their own internal sensation and project that out to the world. Oh man, I'm such an introvert. Base rats. You probably know that if you drop a cat upside down that they'll right themselves and land on their feet. Rats have this reflex too. Even baby rats have this reflex. However, slower, which is tested by dropping them upside down in a tank of water. The baby rats will flip themselves upright as they float down through the water before they are scooped out and dried off. It was assumed that all reflexes are innately coded for in their genes. A group of researchers from the developmental psychobiology field didn't believe in this idea of innate reflexes. They believed that reflexes are learned through non-obvious experience. The researchers took a newly pregnant rat and sent her into space. The rat gestated the babies in space and was brought back to Earth just before giving birth. The baby rats were born on Earth in the lab. When the baby space rats were tested for the righting reflex, they didn't show it. They just floated through the water like they didn't know which way was down, because the baby rats didn't have experience with gravity in utero. They didn't learn about gravity and didn't develop the innate reflex. Therefore, other reflexes may be just as experience-driven as this one. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.